Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to welcome you to the first chapter of What If Naruto Was a Forgotten Prodigy, Hated by His Family. If you'd like a second chapter, let me know in the comments. Enjoy.
Revelations and Farewells, the hidden leaf village of the Land of Fire, home to some of the most powerful ninjas in existence. It is also known for fostering camaraderie and solidarity, but if you knew some of the actions of the town's inhabitants, you would be disappointed in the town. In the village hospital there was a red-haired boy of about 5 years old. He had slightly tanned skin, sky-blue eyes, was taller than other children his age, and had 3 marks on his cheeks that gave him a somewhat fox-like appearance. The child was Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of Konoha. At this moment, the infant lay in a hospital bed with bandages covering most of his body. The most striking feature was the bandage covering his left eye, which had been gouged out, leaving a vertical scar above it. But in his mind, a conversation was taking place that would change his life. Naruto's mind. The little boy was inside a sewer where his tears and cries could be heard. He was lying on the humanoid paw of a giant, orange-furred fox with 9 tails and a strangely human torso. It was Kurama, the Kyubi, the strongest of the 9 Bijou. The ancient Bijou looked at the little boy not with hatred or contempt, but with sadness and helplessness. 5 years ago, Kurama was sealed again after being released from his former Jinchuriki. He tried to escape but was controlled by a cursed Uchiha and his Sharingan. He ended up killing many and destroying a third of the village. He managed to break free from his control and tried to escape, but the 4th Hokage wouldn't allow it and separated him from his chakra, sealing his soul in Naruto and his chakra in 4 other babies. The 4th Hokage took those 4 babies with his wife and abandoned Naruto. At first, he decided to hate the baby, but at the first opportunity, he escaped. But over time, he began to relax. 8 months after being sealed, the little one appeared. Kurama was paralyzed. He knew they would meet, but he thought it would be years, not months later. What surprised him most was Naruto's reaction. At first, he looked at him with surprise. Obviously, he was a giant fox, after all, but then his expression changed to admiration. Kurama was livid. No one had ever seen him like that since his creator died. From that moment on, he received only hateful and contemptuous looks, with a few exceptions. He watched as the infant crawled excitedly toward the bars and threw them. It would have been the perfect moment to attack, but that thought never crossed his mind. He felt something on his right paw and saw the red-haired baby hugging him, but what surprised him most was that the baby looked up and gave him a pure and sincere smile. That smile completely changed the fox's mindset. From then on, Kurama raised Naruto like an older brother, teaching him to read, write, walk, among other things. He had to train him in the basics since, after being kicked out of the orphanage, he lived on his own with the help of the fox for 6 months until the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, found him and gave him that awful apartment. Since the villagers and ninjas would know where he was living, he decided to train him despite his young age. He unlocked his abilities as a Jinchuriki, which gave him a very high healing and regenerative factor, sensory abilities, and the ability to communicate with him at any time without needing to enter his mindscape. And, to the fox's surprise, Naruto possessed the Eye of Kagura, which allowed him to sense emotions, tell if someone was lying or telling the truth, and feel people's presence. Their bond was so strong that they considered each other brothers, Naruto the younger and Kurama the older. But today wasn't enough. Today was October 10th, Naruto's birthday and the day the 4th Hokage died, or so everyone thought. That day, Naruto went to the forest to find food, but on his way back to the village, he was spotted by the villagers, who chased him until they caught him. He growled with rage. Those bastards beat him senseless. The ninjas drew their kunai and shuriken and played target practice with him. One even went so far as to gouge out his left eye. If the 3rd Hokage hadn't arrived with his Anbu, they would have continued torturing him. The old Hokage could only look sadly at the state of his adopted grandson and rushed him to the hospital. Now Naruto was in bed, sleeping in the hospital until he could go back home. The fox, unable to bear it any longer, decided it was time to leave the village or else the redhead would die. Kurama, Naruto, look at me, The fox spoke but received no answer. The little one continued crying in his paw, so he carefully picked him up. Kurama, Naruto, we can't go on like this, we have to leave. Naruto, what do you mean, Kurama nii? I don't know if that's how you say, brother, in Japanese, but that's what Naruto will call Kurama. Kurama, we have to leave Naruto village. I can't stand watching those scumbags mistreat you anymore and not be able to do anything. And the worst part is that old monkey isn't doing anything either. Kurama assumed that the civil council would not allow it. It was truly disappointing to see the one who in his time was called the god of the shinobi reduced to a weak and spineless old man. Naruto, but Gigi always says that. Kurama, you must forgive. Naruto, there's a very fine line between kindness and stupidity, and you crossed that line a long time ago. How many more beatings will you have to endure to understand that? During all the time he spent in Konoha, the only people who cared for him were the third Hokage, whom he saw as a grandfather figure, the owners of the only shop in the village, who cared for him and gave him food, Enko Mitarashi, known as the snake tamer, who, like Naruto, was hated for something she didn't do. She met him one day when he was beaten up and was sent by the Hokage to help him, and upon meeting him, she considered him her little brother, and finally, there were the women of the Uchiha clan, Mikoto Uchiha, Satsuki Uchiha, and Kasumi Uchiha, who found him in an alley after a beating and took him to their home where they began to treat him so he could recover. When he woke up, they got to know each other and got along wonderfully. P.S. Fugaku died in Kurama's attack on the village. Sasuke spends almost all his time training, and Itachi had an ANBU job, so none of them knew Naruto. There was also Kakashi Hatake, the student of the fourth Hokage, but in 5 years he did nothing to protect his cub. He was probably depressed by the death of his master. Naruto remained silent, tears still falling from his eye. The old Hokage told him that he should forgive the civilians and that perhaps one day they would accept him. He wanted to believe in his brother, but his fox brother's words cut deep into his heart. Deep down, he knew he was clinging to a straw, but what else could he do? The only reason he was still alive was thanks to his brother's training. All he could do was hope things would improve, but even that was beyond his reach. Kurama, I'm sorry, pup, but it's the reality. Konoha isn't a safe place for you, and if we don't do something, things aren't going to get better. Naruto, but where are we going? You haven't left the village in a long time. Naruto knew that Kurama had 3 Jinchuriki, being the third, but he never told him who the previous ones were. Kurama told him he would tell him when he was ready. Telling him would reveal certain information that he didn't want to divulge, not because he didn't trust him, but because the answers would devastate the little boy. Kurama, for now, go to sleep and we'll talk about it tomorrow, receiving a "hi" from Naruto, which brought a smile to the fox's face since he had finally convinced his cub to leave the village. Naruto approached the fox and hugged its snout before disappearing from his mental space. Kurama lay back on his paws and began to think. Getting his cub out of here wouldn't be easy because security was so tight. He had come up with several escape plans, but most of them were too risky. Then he remembered something, or rather, a giant toad that had fallen on him. Kurama, it might work, but it's a very risky bet. Konoha Hospital. Upon emerging from his mental space, he saw that he was in the hospital, which was nothing new, but he felt something different. He weakly raised his hand and felt the bandage over his eye, but what he didn't feel was his own eye. The little boy panicked until the shock reached him, and he began to cry again, terrified of what they would do to him next time. But he noticed arms wrapping around him to see the third Hokage, whose eyes reflected regret and sadness. Upon seeing his grandfather figure, he could only hug him and continue crying, while the old Hokage could only hug him and stroke his back, not knowing what to say. He had failed him again. He had failed so many times that he could only hate himself. He should never have revealed his status as a Jinchuriki in front of the entire village. He should never have listened to his successor. The fourth Hokage thought the village would treat him like a hero. What a fool he was. The life of a Jinchuriki was a life of unparalleled suffering, but Naruto suffered more than any other Jinchuriki. When he revealed his status, the civilians demanded his head, and the ninja, despite knowing the difference, still demanded his death. He truly hated himself for doing that to Naruto. Naruto, his voice is broken by sobs, sniff no more sniff, I want them to stop, sniff, I want to be happy. The old man could only hug Naruto tighter until he fell asleep in his arms, then gently laid him down. Sarutobi climbed out the window, but before he did he said, "Hiruzen, AMBU." In an instant, several ninjas in armor and masks appeared, led by a beautiful purple-haired woman wearing a cat mask. "Hiruzen, listen carefully. You're staying here until Naruto recovers, and if anything happens to him, you won't just lose your jobs, you'll lose your lives. Nico, you're in charge." Streets of Konoha. 2 days had passed since the incident and Naruto's mood worsened. During those days he had to endure the nurse's hateful stares, the smell of the medications, among other things. He was discharged and went home. Nico told him that the villagers had broken into his house and caused a lot of damage. As he walked, he received the typical hateful looks that were nothing new, but what terrified him were the villagers' morbidly pleasurable looks when they saw the patch on his eye. Unable to stand it any longer, he ran to his apartment, although what he saw next was something he wouldn't have liked to experience. Near an alley, he found his only friends, Satsuki and Kasumi Uchiha. For some reason, whenever he was near the two of them, his heart would beat strongly, but he didn't understand why. He wanted to greet them, but Kasumi slapped him. "Kasumi, don't come near us, you damned demon." "Naruto, what are you saying?" he said, confused. "Satsuki, don't come near us, demon, you're disgusting." Those words completely destroyed the redhead, while inside the fox was breathing fire with rage at what those bastards had done to his little brother. After saying that, both Uchiha girls ran away from the place in tears, but no one saw them. Naruto, for his part, remained standing without moving a muscle until he felt a great feeling of hatred inside him. He started walking home, but when he arrived, he saw the scene. His apartment was a mess. Almost all the furniture and objects were destroyed, and the ceiling, which looked like it was about to collapse, made it an uninhabitable place. But he didn't care and lay down in a corner to cry like never before, to the point of crying blood from his right eye. "Kurama, calm down, pup, we're leaving right now." "Naruto, okay, Nii-chan, I don't want to stay here anymore." But when he opened his right eye, the fox was impressed to the core to see Naruto's eye, which turned into a crimson-red star with a small, three-pointed black shuriken. "Kurama, Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan." "Naruto, what's wrong, Nii-chan?" "Kurama, look at yourself in a mirror." Naruto took a piece of crystal and looked at his right eye and was surprised to see its change. "Naruto, what happened to me?" "Kurama, you obtained the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, one of the most powerful dojutsu in existence, but I don't know how you obtained it. But now we really have to go." "Naruto, because now we really have to go." "Kurama, if the council finds out you have that eye, they'll lock you up to use you as a weapon and breeding machine, and that's worse than death." "Naruto, but how will we get there?" "Kurama, with the summoning jutsu, it's a jutsu that will make you appear in another dimension where there will be a clan of animals specialized in the ninja arts. By passing a test, they will let you sign their contract so you can summon them and they will help you in battle. Only a very select group can have an affiliated summoning clan. If you are not affiliated, we will have to find another way to escape. In the meantime, look for some things like clothes or utensils and write a farewell to your loved ones on a scroll." 30 minutes later, Naruto had everything ready to leave, and he even wrote a farewell letter and started making hand gestures. Summoning jutsu. And the little redhead disappeared. Konoha streets 10 p.m. The third Hokage, a silver-haired Anbu wearing a dog mask, and Mikoto Uchiha, the leader of the Uchiha clan, who was deeply worried about the red-haired boy she considered her fifth son, were at Naruto's house. The Hokage, Mikoto, and the Anbu were all tearful, having just read Naruto's letter. They came for Naruto because, since his home was destroyed, Hiruzen would invite him to stay at his house while he looked for a new home for him, but when they arrived and read Naruto's letter, the three of them fell to their knees with tears in their eyes. "Hiruzen, I'm sorry Naruto, I'm so sorry. My ninja way, Tengu Valley." Naruto had fallen on his but upon arriving in the realm of summons, he took a moment to analyze his situation and tried to get his bearings. He was in a foggy forest that gave it a certain air of mystery but also of fear. The one-eyed boy was euphoric, he was finally free from that hell. If it weren't for the place he was in, he would have started jumping for joy, but it wasn't the time for that. "Naruto, Kurama Nii, it really worked, I actually did it." "Kurama, it seems so, pup." It appears you're part of that select group of summoners. Congratulations. He said this while in his mind he sent a quick prayer of thanks to his creator. Kurama, now we have to find the clan that lives around here. Try to detect any possible members of the clan that lives around here. The redhead nodded and used his sensory abilities. Despite being only 5 years old, he could sense people's presences and feelings within a 200-meter radius, but he didn't sense anything. So the fox used his chakra to extend the detection range, but still, they didn't sense anything. They both began to worry, thinking something had gone wrong, but then they felt a sense of happiness 500 meters behind them. The redhead ran, driven by his curiosity, continuing to run until the fog lifted, revealing a bridge over a river. In front of the bridge was a large Chinese gate, which the redhead carefully opened, revealing a beautiful landscape. A beautiful valley flanked on both sides by mountains and rock formations, with waterfalls cascading through the clouds, giving it a mysterious and magical appearance. Naruto gazed intently at the beautiful place, wanting to commit it to memory, but he could see a winged figure approaching his location. He was too high up to see its shape, but he wasn't going to risk an attack, so he remained on guard. The unknown being landed in front of the boy, who could see it clearly. It was a woman, one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen. She looked about 28 years old, wearing a black kimono that showed off her incredible figure with a red obi, ordinary sandals, tavi socks, long black hair tied in a long ponytail with an orange ribbon, DD cup breasts, red eyes, and that sensual smile that would drive any pervert wild with lust. But what surprised the boy most was seeing 2 black wings on the woman's back, one thin and the other full of black feathers, giving her a magical air that moved Naruto deeply. Kurama was frozen. He recognized the creature in front of him, but not even in his wildest dreams could he have imagined that his pup would encounter this summoning clan, and he could only think of one thing. Kurama, pup, you have the devil's luck. Naruto didn't understand what his brother was saying, but he didn't have time to react because the woman jumped on him, hugged him, trapped his head between her breasts, and screamed at the top of her lungs. Kawaii. The woman realized what she was doing, so she blushed and pulled away from the little boy, looking at him intently. She had to control herself to avoid jumping on him again. Up close he was even cuter, but then she saw the patch over his eye. Little one, you're hurt. That patch looks a bit worn. Should I call a doctor? Naruto, it's not that I lost my eye a few days ago, but my wounds have already healed. I'd say they brutally gouged out his eye. If I find the culprit, I'll kill him for hurting an innocent child. The woman thought, but she also noticed the child's lack of wings. Naruto, excuse me, miss, but can you tell me where I am? Who are you? And well, the little one blushed at the question. What are you? The woman in question smiled at him. Excuse me, where are my manners? My name is Yuki Tengu, and you are at the entrance of Tengu Valley. And with your last question, I am a Tengu, and you, little one, where did you come from? Naruto, nice to meet you, my name is Naruto Uzumaki and I used the summoning jutsu without a contract and appeared here. Yuki, era, that means you're a candidate for summoner. We haven't had one in over 70 years. I suppose you have to go to the clan leader. And she stood behind him, gripping his waist tightly, and said with a mischievous smile, Yuki, hold on tight, Naruto. The redhead didn't understand what she meant, but when she spread her wings he tried to refuse, but he could only scream in fear as he began to fly all over the valley with one eye closed and clinging to Yuki as if his life depended on it. Yuki, Naruto, look down. I promise not to let go of you. Besides, this is a view you won't want to miss. Hearing the sweet voice, he opened his one visible eye and could see the details of the valley, especially the resident Tengus. The women were all beautiful. There were only black and red-haired women with hair that reached at least to their backs, with enormous breasts and raven-like features. The men were very frightening. They were at least 2 meters tall, like mountains of pure muscle, and had even more raven-like features. But what surprised him most was that he didn't see any children, but he didn't pay it any mind and decided to enjoy the flight with a smile. Yuki smiled slightly as she watched the child relax in her arms and began to reflect on the little boy's behavior. From what she saw, Naruto was kind and respectful, which pleased her because she had heard of arrogant summoners who treated summoning clans like tools, but she liked that Naruto wasn't like that. 10 minutes later, Naruto and Yuki arrived at the Tengu compound, which looked like a one-story Japanese mansion, but nothing more was needed because it was as big as the Uchiha district. At the entrance, 2 golden oriental dragon statues could be seen in front of a large wooden door. "Yuki, welcome to my house," he said with a smile. "Naruto, wait a minute, your house? Didn't we say we were going to talk to the clan leader?" As she opened the door, she turned her head to answer him. "Yuki, hee, you see, it turns out he's my father." The little Jinchuriki's eyes widened in shock. If he had known from the beginning, he would have acted more respectfully. "Yuki, relax, I've never cared much about my position as heiress, nor do I like formalities," she said, smiling. The little boy smiled with relief and followed her. The mansion was fit for a daimyo, but instead of golden statues and luxurious portraits, there was simple furniture giving it a cozy feel. The photos were only of Tengu families with big smiles. He could see several Tengus chatting, conversing, playing, some even fighting and others making bets. Naruto may have been raised by a fox with a reputation for being a mass murderer, but even for him it was strange. Speaking of the fox, he had been very quiet, but I would ask him later. He continued walking with the woman, oblivious to the stares he was receiving. The men's jaws dropped to the floor at the sight of a human, a mere child. Some, however, beamed at the prospect of having a new summoner. The women, all flushed, were barely containing their urge to give him a deathly hug. After walking for a while, they arrived at a huge sliding door at the end of the hallway. Naruto was very nervous. If common Tengu were mountains of pure muscle, he imagined the clan leader being 3 times the size of a common Tengu. The woman noticed how nervous Naruto was, so she put her hand on his shoulder and gave him a smile that calmed the boy, but he was still a little nervous about the imminent encounter. Yuki knocked on the door to speak with her father. "Yuki, Dad, can I come in? There's something that needs your attention." There were murmurs inside the room until a voice spoke. "Come in, dear," a somewhat frightening voice said. The woman calmly walked through the door with the child following closely behind as she prepared for the encounter. The room resembled an office, with various pieces of furniture piled high with scrolls, neatly arranged. There were cushions for sleeping. With effort, she lifted her head from Yuki's back and finally saw him. The leader of the Tengu clan wasn't just big, he was enormous. Although he appeared old, his presence and aura suggested otherwise. He was at least 2.6 meters tall and broader and more bulky than any other Tengu. The wings on his back seemed thicker and larger than those of other Tengu. He looked like a giant human with black feathers covering various parts of his body, giving him the appearance of a fusion between a giant human and a crow. But her fear vanished, replaced by the urge to throw herself to the ground and laugh like a madman at the sight of his long nose. "That piece of a nose, he can even aim for it," thought the little boy, completely unaware of the situation and the fact that the person in question was looking at him. It wasn't like he could be blamed, he'd never seen a person with such a long nose, even if he was a Tengu and not a human, but still. But his thoughts were interrupted. "You're not the first to think that, little one." The voice surprised the child. "Naruto, eh?" The clan leader was looking at him with an indulgent expression and a smile, as if he knew what he was thinking. Naruto turned red with embarrassment at having been so easily read and quickly lowered his head in apology. "Relax, little one, you're not the first to be mesmerized by my nose. That said, let me introduce myself. My name is Sajobo, the 7th leader of the Tengu clan. Pleased to meet you." He bowed respectfully. "Naruto, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, pleased to meet you Sajobo-sama," he said with great respect. Sajobo continued to stare with a serious face but broke into 1,000 pieces, letting out a sigh. "Sajobo, God, I can't stand formalities. No Tengu likes them, you know. Naruto, call me Grandpa." With a smile, "Naruto, but Sajobo-sama, I can't." "Yuki, era, in that case call me Ka-chan, Mom." If her father could mess with the cute boy, so could she. But they both became worried when they saw the child begin to tremble as his eyes began to glass. "Naruto, really?" He said it with an almost broken voice. "Naruto, do you really want to be my Ka-chan, mother?" Yuki blamed herself for what she did at first when she thought her eye had been ripped out. She believed it was possible that she had suffered abuse in her life and was psychologically fragile, but she hugged the emotionally broken little redhead. "Yuki, yes, if you want I'll be your Ka-chan, my little Naru-chan," she said, embracing him maternally. The little boy returned the hug tightly, crying tears of joy, afraid he might disappear. The woman affectionately stroked his hair. Sajobo watched the scene, deeply moved. It seemed he would have a grandson, and even if it weren't by blood, he couldn't care less. But he also wondered how his son-in-law and granddaughter would take it, because his daughter was serious about this. He also wondered how Naruto had become so emotionally distraught. But there were other matters to attend to. "Sajobo, not to cut the crap, but we need to talk about the fact that our clan has a summoner candidate." Upon hearing Sajobo, Naruto was about to separate from Yuki, but she wouldn't allow it. She grabbed him by the waist, bringing him towards the table where they were talking, placed the redhead in her lap, and hugged him from behind. "Sajobo, you see, Naruto, we Tengu are a clan that decided to stay out of the conflict and war, and that's why we've been almost forgotten. We maintain secret agreements with other clans, but we generally don't associate with anyone. That's why I need to ask you what you expect from us." The little boy just lowered his gaze. "Naruto, I just wanted to escape." "Yuki, escape from who, Naru-chan?" The woman's voice was no longer warm and pleasant, but cold and ruthless. Sajobo wasn't taking it any better, but decided to ask a more detailed question. "Sajobo, Naruto, could you tell us what your life has been like so far?" The little boy hesitated. Until now, people hated him for being a Jinchuriki and had shown him no mercy, but he decided to tell them. He recounted everything without exception, tears streaming down his face. His situation as a Jinchuriki, the beatings, how Kurama had cared for him like an older brother, what had happened 2 days prior on his birthday when he lost his left eye at the hands of the villagers. At the end of his story, the redhead was weeping, releasing all the pain he had bottled up for those 5 years, while being embraced by his new mother. Yuki was horrified by the behavior of the villagers and ninjas of Konoha. She even felt an urge to go there and start a massacre, but she put it aside for now. The child in her arms was her greatest concern. Sajobo had mixed thoughts. On one hand, he was furious. He couldn't understand how humans could be so stupid as to not understand the difference between a Naruto sealing scroll and a Kurama kunai. But it was even worse for those who knew the difference and did nothing unacceptable. On the other hand, he felt remorse and disappointment. He wasn't to blame for Naruto's life, but he couldn't help reproaching himself because he had helped a certain person develop their potential and abilities. If he hadn't trained that person, Kurama wouldn't have been sealed, and Naruto's life wouldn't have been such a mess. "Sajobo, I understand. Your situation is truly unique. You came here for no other reason than to achieve a specific goal, but that cannot be held against you. You were born in hell and wanted to escape. Even so, we have rules, and I must ask you this question: if we were to accept your training and you became a strong person, what would you use your power for? Greed? Hate? Perhaps." The little boy pondered the old man's words. Greed, he knew the meaning of that word, but he'd never thought of it that way. He had enough to live on, he just wanted to be happy, to have a family, a home, and friends. He didn't think he was particularly greedy for that. Revenge, Konoha had mistreated him since the day he was born. He wanted them to pay, but he didn't want to be like them. But then, what would he want it for? He wondered, and he found his answer. "Naruto, protect." The boy's face changed to one of determination that showed no fear. "Naruto, I know I don't have a house, a home, or people to protect other than Kurama, that's why I left Konoha. I want to find a place to call home and meet people who are important to me. That's why I want to become strong to protect my loved ones and my home. Because that's my ninja way. That's why, train me." Both were impressed by the redhead's comment, and even after everything that had happened, he could still deliver such a speech. The speech was delivered with such conviction that it reminded Sajobo of someone. It was then that the possibility dawned on him. His face, his determination, his surname, it could be him. He decided to put that aside. If his theory was correct, this little one could surpass his predecessor not only as a summoner but as a shinobi and as a person. There was also the matter of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He didn't understand how he obtained it, but he left that for later. The old Tengu gave him a smile. Sajobo, if those are your reasons for becoming strong, then I think you'll be a good summoner for me and my clan. Naruto, so that means that. Sajobo, yes. Sajobo made several hand seals and placed his hand on the table, and a huge scroll appeared, almost as big as the old Tengu, and he opened it. Sajobo, sign with your blood writing your name to become a summoner of the clan. Excited, Naruto wrote on the parchment with his blood without looking at the other name on it. Once he finished, the blood dried and stuck to the parchment, and Sajobo took the parchment and closed it. Sajobo, well, with this matter settled, all that remains for me to say is welcome to the Naruto family. Yuki hugged her new baby from behind while squeezing him between her breasts. Yuki, congratulations Naruto-chan. The little boy could only hug his new mother. But he couldn't help yawning because of everything that had happened that day. Sajobo, Yuki, could you find a room for Naruto? I think he needs a good rest. You can also come back later, we need to speak with the higher-ups about Naruto's arrival. Yuki, sure, see you later, Dad, she said, leaving the room with Naruto in her arms, leaving Sajobo to her thoughts. Sajobo, that child should be crying out for revenge, but instead, he chooses to let it go and look to the future. It's truly impressive that a 5-year-old can act more wisely than an adult. Naruto's bedroom. Naruto was lying in a very comfortable bed wearing white pajamas with black feather designs because Yuki hadn't allowed him to wear anything from Konoha. So she threw away everything she had brought, something he appreciated since he didn't want anything from Konoha, with the obvious exception of Kurama. After that, Yuki gave him pajamas that she thought fit him perfectly. Naruto lay down and finally fell asleep as Yuki left, giving him a goodnight kiss. The fox smiled in his mind with pure joy, his cub was safe. He never imagined he'd end up with the Tengu clan, a clan the equivalent of the Senju, masters of all the ninja arts. This clan spent their time stealing to increase their knowledge, and Naruto had arrived with a clan that could teach him anything. The fox just hoped they would take him seriously. He knew the Tengu inside and out, they were very protective, but above all, and most importantly, they were perverts. The fox was so focused that he didn't notice the presence entering the room. Meeting room. Sajobo was sitting at a circular table where there were several seats for other people. Until Yuki entered. Yuki, sorry for being late, Dad. Naruto-chan didn't have any clothes, so I had to find her something. As she was the next leader of the clan, it was normal for her to be on the council. Sajobo, don't worry, nobody has arrived yet, but they shouldn't be long. Sorry for the delay, boss, we're all here now. Father and daughter looked at the newcomers. There were 5 Tengus dressed in the same way as Sajobo, and they all had the typical crow-like features. The first one had a mischievous air about him, with white hair styled in several spikes and curious yellow eyes. Most likely, like the rest of the clan, he had learned of Naruto's arrival. He was Azazel, leader of the research branch and owner of the largest shinobi library ever created. The second man to enter had an imposing presence. He was just over 2 meters tall, with a muscular build and prominent muscles. He had violet eyes and wore a curious patch over his right eye, while his left eye bore a large vertical scar. But his most striking feature was his strange, unreal hairstyle, perfectly spiked and defying gravity. He exuded an air of authority and discipline. He was the husband of her daughter, Baraquil, the clan's leader, instructor, and specialist in weapons and taijutsu. The third had long, black hair that reached his mid-back, he was thin, had violet eyes, pale skin, and a serious expression that never faded. He was Kokabeel, the clan strategist and the most serious man anyone could ever meet. The last two were clearly related. Their faces were practically identical, they were only distinguished by their gender. One had long, straight hair, black eyes, and a smile adorned their face. The woman was Aaron, a specialist in politics, and her twin brother Ren, a specialist in information and the means to obtain it. These 5, along with Sajobo and Yuki, were the clan's council, but the final decision was the leaders. Sajobo, it was about time they arrived. I suppose they already know that. Kokabeel, that a human child arrived and that he might be our second summoner. God, of course, if that kind of news gets around so quickly. Sajobo, actually, we've had 2 summoners, with today's child being the most recent and youngest. Everyone's eyes were wide with shock, except for Yuki and Barakwil. The latter had been told about the matter by Yuki. Sajobo, before you start screaming like madmen, sit down, I have a lot to tell you. Everyone sat down in the remaining chairs at the table. They didn't like what they heard at all. Sajobo told them about the redhead's life. They were furious, especially Barakwil, since his wife had decided to adopt the little Uzumaki boy. He was her son, and no one hurts their child without suffering the consequences. Put on your ropes, you shitty crows, if anyone's going to kill those shitty bastards it's me. A guttural voice said, coming from an unknown place. Everyone except Sajobo looked around until Azazel spotted a crystal ball in the middle of the room. The white-haired man approached and saw a pair of red eyes filled with hatred and sadness, and he was terrified just looking at them. Sajobo, calm down, Kurama. Every action has consequences, and Konoha will suffer them sooner or later. Allow me to introduce you to an old friend. This is Kurama, the nine-tailed fox. I managed to establish a bond with him. As I've told you, he's sealed inside Naruto. Everyone was surprised by that, but they greeted politely, though many had doubts. Ren, Sajobo-sama, since when have you known each other? Ren took pride in being informed about everything. Not knowing that bothered him deeply. Sajobo, it was a long time ago, we met by chance and became friends. But when I was elected clan leader, I no longer had time to hang out with him. Kurama, and boy, have you changed. The biggest whore of the clan has become responsible, and on top of that, you had a daughter. Haha. Everyone burst out laughing when they heard that. Sajobo coughed so they would hear him. Sajobo, getting back to the topic, Naruto has already signed our contract and will stay with us until it is necessary, but I called you to talk about how we will train him. Barakwil, at only 5 years old, his physical condition will be the most important thing. Let me take care of that. Yuki smiled at her husband's words. She had always wanted a child to spend time with. And this was her chance. Azazel nodded. Azazel, I agree, however, he needs a basic education like math and history. As for ninjutsu, genjutsu, and the rest, he'll learn it since he's very young, but I wouldn't rule out fuinjutsu since he's an Uzumaki. Also, how much chakra does he have? Kurama, a lot. Kokobile, it defines a lot. Kurama, I'll leave it at that. He's 100% Uzumaki because the Uzumaki blood completely replaced the other blood that gradually disappeared, leaving only the Uzumaki blood. And he's my Jinchuriki, which further enhances his chakra. I'd say he has as much chakra as an elite Jonin. Everyone was stunned, they knew he would have more chakra than children his age, but not that much. Kokobile, or will the little one be a monster when he grows up? Azazel had an idea. Azazel, if he has that much chakra, I have an idea to accelerate his training, although we'll have to be careful because otherwise he'll end up with his brain fried. Yuki, Azazel, you will not put my baby in danger, or I will rip off your legs and shove them where the sun doesn't shine. Everyone was scared by that, not knowing whether to put their hands on their legs or their butts. Azazel, just kidding, I swear if we're careful with the method there won't be a problem. He really liked her legs, especially for what was between them. Sajobo, calm down, Yuki, let Azazel explain. Azazel, there is a B-rank Quinjutsu called Kage Bunshin no Jutsu with which you can create clones of its user that are solid and not just replicas, and most importantly, the memories of the clone when it dissipates are received by the original, but if we exaggerate, it could suffer a mental overload from so much information. Sajobo, so you want to train the clones academically while Barakwil trains them physically? That would save us a lot of training time. Azazel, very well, I will bring the scroll early tomorrow. They were all going to leave, but Sajobo stopped them. Sajobo, I need to confirm something. Azazel, during the destruction of Yuzu, did you happen to loot the library? Azazel, of course I did it with the help of my family. I didn't leave those ninjas from IWA and Kiri even the scraps, hahaha. But why do you ask? Sajobo, I need you to check his family tree. I think Naruto may be related to our first summoner. Everyone tensed up and glanced sideways at the fox. Kurama, because they're looking at me. Sajobo, you see, Kurama, 60 years ago I cancelled the contract with our first summoner because that person was primarily responsible for your imprisonment and that of your brothers. Kurama's mind went blank. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. He felt as if he'd been slapped across the face. Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage and the god of shinobi of Konoha. He was primarily known for his Kekkei Genkai, Mokuton, an element of immense power that allowed him to control nature and even trees, plants, flowers, roots, forests, wood, and so on. It also allowed him to suppress the power of the tailed beasts and calm them. Now it made more sense why he was so strong. That's why he developed his Mokuton so quickly. It was thanks to the Tengu clan. Kurama, God, if Naruto is his descendant, I'll start to think Hagoromo is playing a joke on me. Damn, it's been ages since I've been this worked up. Kurama, just a moment. He hadn't been upset for years, not since he met his puppy. Kurama, don't fuck with me. The idea was utterly ridiculous, but if it turned out to be true, he couldn't help but let out a cruel laugh. Kurama, relax, Sajobo, it was that Senju monkey who locked me up. The human incubator's name is Kushina Uzumaki, look her up in the records to see if she's related to that bastard. Everyone was speechless when they heard him call the boy's mother. Sajobo, Kurama, I know she was your previous Jinchuriki, but it's not that big of a deal. Kurama, Sajobo, you have no idea what that woman and her husband did to my puppy. They abandoned him to his fate and condemned him to a life of pain. Baraquil, Kurama-sama, what did Naruto's parents do? And Kurama told them, and they all wanted to go find them and kill them in the most painful way possible. End of chapter. Share it, write comments, vote, and goodbye. Training begins. Tengu Mansion. Yuki and Baraquil were walking through the mansion's hallways towards Naruto's room to introduce him to Baraquil. Yesterday, Kurama told them how Naruto's parents abandoned him. Upon hearing this, they both felt a great deal of hatred toward Minato and Kushina, but decided not to tell Naruto because it would devastate the little boy. However, they knew they would have to tell him sooner or later. For now, they were going to take care of him and train him to bring him happiness and fill the void of his pain. But Baraquil sighed, which made Yuki smile. Yuki, era, are you getting nervous? What will our son think if he sees his father cowering in front of him? Baraquil had a twitch in his eye. Baraquil, it's not that, my dear, it's that, do you think he'll like me? I'm not exactly pleasing to the eye. She was about to continue, but Yuki put a finger to her lips. Yuki, she'll love you. Naruto-chan isn't someone who judges by appearances. Yuki, he'll love you, he said with a smile. Baraquil composed himself, determined, and carefully opened the door. But the couple hadn't expected the little boy to have company. They recognized the redhead by his crimson hair. It was the female figure that left them speechless. The girl in question looked about 7 years old, with long black hair tied in a long ponytail with an orange ribbon that reached her hips, beautiful violet eyes just like Baraquil's, D-cup breasts, somewhat surprising for a 7-year-old, and very pretty features. Baraquil stood there, speechless, his mouth agape, while Yuki smiled tenderly at the sweet scene. Yuki, era, it seems Naruto-chan felt lonely and his Wani-chan came to keep him company. Naruto awoke to the sound of his mother's voice and tried to get up, but the arms wrapped around his small body prevented him. Turning over, he noticed the girl beside him and was struck by how much she resembled his new mother. Since he was immobilized by the unknown girl's arms, he turned his head toward the pair. Naruto, good morning, Kachan. Who is the pretty girl and why is she sleeping with me? I asked naively. After all, I was 5 years old, I wasn't going to be upset about being on a woman's breasts. Not for the moment. Yuki was about to answer, but the girl began to wake up and noticed the redhead in her arms, and the effect was immediate. Kawaii. The girl screamed as she squeezed the redhead between her legs. The little boy had a strange feeling of déjà vu. Yuki, Akino dear, if you let go of your brother we can all go have breakfast together. The one newly known as Akino opened her eyes wide. Akino, brother. I screamed in surprise. Naruto looked at his mother. If she was his daughter, they were exactly alike, differing only in their eyes, age, and size. Yuki, yes, dear, due to certain circumstances, I adopted Naruto yesterday. He's also the clan's new summoner, but I think it would be best if you introduced yourselves. Naruto shyly pulled away from Akino's arms to introduce himself. Naruto, hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you, Wani-chan. Akino's mind went blank as her cheeks flushed, and she hugged the redhead again, pressing him against her breasts once more. Akino, kawaii, God, you're so kawaii it should be illegal, he said, rubbing the redhead's head against his soft black hair. As if that wasn't enough, the mother decided to throw more fire on the coals. Yuki, Mo, it's not fair, Akino-chan. I want to talk to Naru-chan too, making a pout. Akino, no. He's my little brother, only I can hug him. The mother grabbed the child's waist to pull him towards her, but Akino grabbed his arm. Yuki, he's my son, I have priority to hug him, he said, looking defiantly at his daughter. If anyone paid attention, they could see Barakweel processing what had happened. They could even see the lightning between the mother and daughter. Kurama, meanwhile, was dying of laughter. Kurama, oh God, this is gold. If the puppy is already a magnet for women at 5 years old, he'll most likely lose his virginity before he's 15. Naruto was panicking, he didn't understand why they were fighting over him, but he didn't want to see them angry. His head was caught between his mother's and sister's attraction, so he looked for an opening or a foothold, and that turned out to be one of Akino's breasts, which he grabbed. The girl let out a cute moan, and she and Yuki looked into Naruto's eyes, but it was a grave mistake. Naruto was now using one of the most well-known techniques among women. This was ninja art puppy eyes. Naruto, please don't fight, I don't want to see you angry, she said, almost feigning tears. The women's brains turned to mush at that moment. A huge scream echoed throughout the complex. The Tengu, fearing an attack, began running around like headless chickens, searching for the source of the problem. Meanwhile, in a certain redhead's room, 2 women were squeezing that child to death while shouting, "We're sorry," over and over, but the phrase they always repeated was, "Kawaii." Kurama, already on the verge of death from laughing so much, could only think, "Kurama, forget what I said, she's not leaving this valley a virgin." Barakweel stood there like a stone, trying to understand what had happened. But he ended up wondering what the hell had happened. Dining room of the complex. After that family scene, the 4 of them went to the dining room for breakfast. Yuki and Barakweel walked hand in hand, while Naruto and Akino walked hand in hand. Akino wore a white kimono, wooden stilts, and long red pants. Naruto wore a black doji with long black pants and simple shoes. Upon arriving at the dining room, they saw an enormous room with tatami mats on the floor. There were hundreds of trays of food and several Tengu eating at the longest table he had ever seen. Naruto noticed that at the beginning of the table, men were seated on the right side and women on the left. On the right, several men were arguing or laughing, while the women were more discreet, though he could see them smiling. The other end of the table was where they were headed, and there he saw several pairs of Tengu feeding each other. The exception was his adoptive grandfather, who sat at the far end of the table, facing them, with 4 places around him for them. Naruto and Barakweel sat to the right of Sajobo, while Yuki and Akino sat to the left. Akino, good morning. Hee, she said happily, but inside she had a twitch in her eye from being separated from her new little brother. Sajobo, good morning children. Yuki, thank you for waiting for us, father. Sajobo, there's no problem, daughter. I love spending mornings with my family. But a vein appeared on his forehead. Sajobo, by the way, do you happen to know about a scream that put the entire clan on high alert? Yuki blushed at the rhetorical question. Akino just looked away while trying to hide her laughter. Yuki, don't laugh as if it weren't your fault too, young lady. Akino blushed and pouted. The men, for their part, ate in awkward silence. Barakweel didn't know how to start a conversation because of the commotion today. Yuki had forgotten to introduce him. Meanwhile, Naruto was very nervous, many doubts swirling in his head, all related to the man beside him who, in theory, was now his father. Barakweel, this is awkward. Seriously, of all the things I could say, I had to say that, he thought, while his mind pounded. The redhead smiled shyly. Naruto, a little. Barakweel blinked in confusion and disbelief at the boy's words, but then began to laugh heartily. Barakweel, I'm sorry, it's not that I don't like you or anything. It's just that I always wanted to have a child. It's not that I don't love Akino, she's my princess, but there are things that only a father and his child can do, and well, discovering that I have a child overnight has made me a little nervous. Naruto, well, I always wanted a father to protect and train me. I love Kurama and I very much, but I also would have liked to have a real family in Konoha. Barraquil, in that case, you don't have to worry, I will be the one to take care of your training. Naruto smiled at that and excitedly asked, Naruto, when do we start? What are you going to teach me? Barraquil, ha ha ha, relax son, we'll start after breakfast. We'll start with. And so the father-son conversation continued as normal until breakfast was over. Tengu Valley. The pair met in a clearing they would use as a training ground. Barraquil was thinking about how he would explain his training to Naruto, while the redhead held back his excitement. Barraquil, well son, I don't know how to explain what I'm going to say, so I want you to make an effort to understand it. You know what a chakra is. Naruto, if chakra is the result of the fusion between the physical energy present in all living cells and the spiritual energy, it is also what allows us to perform jutsus. Barraquil smiled, it was word by word. Barraquil, yes, but you have to understand that there are different types of chakra, but the basic ones can be summarized in 5 types: fire, water, wind, lightning, and earth. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses. Generally, people only have one element, but there are cases where they can have 2 or more. But there's something few people know: depending on our affinity, our bodies can be more flexible, resistant, fast, etc. That's why I'm going to ask you to run around the valley, doing a loop until you come back here, and don't stop until I tell you to. If you do that, I'll be able to see what your affinities are and choose a suitable taijutsu style. Naruto, yes, father. He said this before taking off running down the valley at full speed. Barraquil spread his wings to follow the redhead from the air, now all he could do was wait for him to tire. If only he knew who he was messing with. 3 hours later. Barraquil, but how the hell does he do it? What was happening was that his son had been running at full speed for 3 hours straight, without stopping for a single moment, and he just kept going, even circling the entire valley twice. He knew that being an Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki, he would have great stamina, but he hadn't expected it to be this much. Furthermore, the boy's body's reactions confused him. He could see through people's movements, but Naruto confused him. He had seen a glimpse of all the affinities, something that was impossible. He thought it might be because of his Uzumaki blood, but he dismissed that idea and decided they would address the matter later. Barraquil, Naruto, that's enough. You did very well. Now follow me, we'll return to the clearing where we started. Upon reaching the clearing, they saw Yuki and Akino waiting for them. They were sitting in the shade of a tree surrounded by several boxes. As they approached, Akino tackled the redhead, giving him a death hug. Naruto smiled and returned the hug. Behind them, the jealous mother pouted but noticed her husband's arrival. Yuki, hello dear, how has Naruken's training been going so far? They both saw the children talking but also noticed their labored breathing, much to Barraquil's secret relief. If his son wasn't breathing heavily after that exercise, he would begin to consider the theory that his son was a freak of nature. Barraquil, the truth is that he has exceeded all my expectations. Not only did he run for 3 hours without stopping, but he also went around the valley twice. Yuki's eyes widened at what her husband had said. Barraquil, he has great stamina, but the lack of an eye has caused him to almost crash into rocks and trees. The best thing for that would be to increase his senses. Yuki, we'll think of something, but in the meantime, Akino and I made you some food. Naruken and Akenokan, come on, let's eat. The children came holding hands. Yuki couldn't help but give her daughter a mischievous smile, which made her pout. The family began eating on the ground under the tree. Meanwhile, Barraquil pondered how to deal with the problem. From what he saw, it wouldn't be easy to find a taijutsu style for him, given the boy's unique physical abilities. He would have to ask Azazel for permission to search his library. There was also the matter of his affinities. Although he wasn't sure what they were, he was certain he had multiple affinities. He was pulled from his thoughts when he felt something on his cheek and saw his wife holding a piece of tortilla with a smile. Baraquiel smiled back, set it aside, and began to enjoy their time with the family. At that same moment, Sajobo and Azazel were walking towards the clearing. Sajobo then looked at his companion. Sajobo, then. Azazel gave him a sly smile. Azazel, great, you haven't seen the curves I had, I spent half the night. He would have continued if it weren't for the death glare his leader gave him. Azazel, just kidding, God, nobody understands my sense of humor anymore. But Sajobo's deathly gaze remained. Azazel sighed. Azazel, I found the Uzumaki clan's family tree. It seems your theory was correct, that Gaki, brat, is Hashirama's great-grandson. I found a contract stating that in exchange for Hashirama marrying Mito Uzumaki, he would send his eldest son to live in Uzushiogakure, the Uzumaki clan's village. His son married the clan leader's daughter, and from that union, Kushina Uzumaki was born. She went to Konoha to become Kurama's second Jinchuriki. We already know the rest. Sajobo nodded, pondering the irony of the situation. Naruto was a descendant of the man banished as a summoner for his actions against the tailed beasts, and not only that, one of those tailed beasts was sealed inside Naruto and even got along famously with him. The worst part was that the village Hashirama founded ended up making his descendants' life a living hell, and of all the people, Kurama was the one who helped him the most. Kurama, don't look at me. Azazel jumped in fright at the voice that manifested in the sphere carried by Sajobo. Sajobo, hello Kurama, how has Naruto's training been going? Kurama, it's hard to say, but he's in good physical condition. Escaping the villagers helped somewhat. The problem is that Baraquiel is having trouble choosing a taijutsu style because he can't figure out the pup's abilities, but he doesn't want to risk choosing one lightly. I think I know what the problem is, if you can even call it that. Azazel, oh, is the great Kyubi-chan hiding something from us? Laughing inwardly, bothering someone with great power and them being unable to do anything feels good. Kurama narrowed his eyes furiously. Kurama, be careful what you say, you're playing with fire. Sajobo, knowing what was coming, tried to stop Azazel, but it was too late. Azazel, oh, what will you do? You're locked inside the Gaki, ha ha ha. Meanwhile, Sajobo suppressed the urge to slap his face at how stupid his subordinate could be. Kurama gave a macabre smile, which gave Azazel a bad feeling. Kurama, for now, nothing. I have all the time in the world to plan my revenge. Advantages of being immortal. My pup won't live forever, and when he rests in peace, I'll be free. Then I'll come for you. After all, you still have several centuries of life ahead of you. Revenge is a dish best served cold and shouting, he said, laughing cruelly. Azazel began to sweat profusely but felt his leader's hand on his shoulder. Sajobo, don't worry, I'll start preparing your funeral, he said solemnly as he continued walking to the clearing, leaving Azazel standing like a pine tree thinking of hundreds of plans to escape the Biju's future revenge. Upon reaching the clearing, they could see Baraquiel and Yuki eating while watching Naruto and Akino playing. Naruto noticed his grandfather's arrival. Naruto, hello Gigi, he said with a smile, but then realized that his fox brother was inside the crystal sphere. Naruto, Kurama nii but how have you? He could not finish because of Akino's arrival. Akino, hi hihi, are you coming to play? I ask hopefully. Sajobo, no Akino-chan, I've come to see Naruto. We need to discuss something about his training. To the girl's great dismay, she said she didn't want to be separated from her little brother, but she let him go anyway. Sajobo took a pentagram from his pocket with the kanji for all the elements, including secondary ones. Naruto was confused, so he waited for Sajobo to explain. Sajobo, Naruto, to truly advance your training, we need to determine your elemental affinities. Therefore, I ask that you channel your chakra into this pentagram, and we will discover your elements. The redhead nodded and focused his chakra on the pentagram, which began to glow. The kanji for the elements Katan, fire, Suiton, water, Futon, wind, Raiton, lightning, and Doton, earth, were revealed. This shocked everyone, who had thought he would only have two affinities. But everyone's eyes widened when the lines of the Suiton and Raiton kanji, as well as the lines of the Katan and Raiton kanji, began to glow, indicating the Ranton, storm, and Enten, flame, elements. This surprised everyone, but what truly left them speechless was seeing the Suiton and Doton lines begin to glow a yellow and gold color. Nobody said anything, the adults were shocked, the children didn't understand what was happening, while Kurama started clucking like crazy. Kurama, so I was right. When Konoha finds out about this, all hell is going to break loose when they realize they've lost a Mokuton user. The fox's words woke the others up. Naruto, what is Mokuton? Wait a minute, how did you end up inside me, Kurama nii? He said, confused, upon seeing his brother inside a crystal ball. Kurama, I'm not trapped inside the ball, it's just an image so I can talk to everyone. Regarding Mokuton, it's a unique element created from the combination of two elements, but not everyone can use it. You need an inherited ability called a Kekkei Genkai. Naruto remained silent, thinking about what his brother had said. Naruto, from what you're saying, I'm not the first to have it. Kurama, yes, in fact, the first person who had it was the one who captured and sealed me, and he was also the founder of Konoha and your great-grandfather Hashirama Senju. Naruto was shocked to the core. His great-grandfather was the founder of the village that mistreated him and clamored for his death day after day. Naruto, so why were they doing it? Why did they hate me so much? He would have continued if it hadn't been for the arms that wrapped around him. He turned his head and saw that the arms belonged to his sister. Akino, I know you've had a hard time, but that doesn't matter anymore. You're with us, and that's what's important. Everyone smiled at what Akino said. If only the girl hadn't opened her mouth. Akino, besides, if they don't want you, there will be more Naruken for me. Crushing him against her chest. They all fell backwards because of the girl's stupidity. Kurama, he's going to rape him. I bet my 9 tails he's going to rape him. Naruto, but what now? Azazel approached with a small scroll. Azazel, we want you to learn the scroll jutsu. Naruto, cool, you'll see, I'll master this jutsu today. And he ran to the far end of the clearing with the parchment. Azazel, yeah, right, as if a 5-year-old could do something an experienced jonin can't. But he regretted it when he saw the look they were giving him. If looks could kill, he would have been reduced to ashes by now, but the devil's voice came to his rescue. Kurama, shall we bet? If his puppy showed him anything, it was that he had unparalleled talent. Azazel, ha ha ha, go ahead, it's your loss, not mine. Baraquiel and Sajobo stared in disbelief at the scene and how foolish Azazel was. Yuki began to consider killing the 2 idiots for betting through her son. Kurama, if I lose, I promise not to kill you in the future. But if I win, Naruto can take 3 jutsu scrolls from your library. Azazel, deal done. And he lay down against a tree near the place. Sajobo, because you're making a bet you can't win. Naruto may be talented, but there are limits. Kurama, is what I hear a bet. Sajobo was about to accept, but he remembered the last time he bet against the Bijou, and the time before that, and the time before that, and the time before that. Now that he thought about it, he never won, he always lost, so he wisely decided to sit and wait. Meanwhile, the fox wore an arrogant and proud smile on his face. Hours later, it was already getting dark when Azazel woke up. At some point he had fallen asleep, but he could see the little redhead in front of him and smiled arrogantly, remembering the bet. Azazel, hee, what's up, little one? Have you come to ask me for a break? The redhead looked at him, confused. Naruto, you're talking about the bet, well, you see. Azazel, ha, I knew you'd fail. No matter how much faith that Kitsune has, he's too gullible. I admit you have potential, but it will take you years to reach an adequate level and centuries to achieve it. Naruto, you're finished, he said with his eyes half closed lazily. Azazel's mouth was open, he was about to say something. Naruto, I just came to tell you that the others are waiting for you at the hot springs and that you should come quickly. And besides, I'm just a clone. Puff. Azazel was stunned, unable to believe it, his eyes completely white and his mouth open. Thank goodness, because otherwise his soul would surely have left his body. Thermal baths of the Tengu clan. The family was walking through the streets of the Tengu clan towards the hot springs when suddenly the one-eyed redhead stopped and said a few words. Naruto, you stupid, shitty crow. The fox inside him completely agreed with what had been said. Yuki, that mouth, Naruchan. Naruto, but Kachan Azazel was making fun of my clone because he thought he won the bet. Yuki, I see, I'll teach him a lesson. The family was going to separate to go to their respective restrooms based on gender, but two women disagreed. When Naruto was about to enter the men's section, a hand stopped him, and he saw it was his mother. Yuki, Naru-chan, why don't you come and bathe with us? The men turned their heads in disbelief, but Naruto was going to protest. Naruto, but Ka-chan, I'm a boy, I can't come in. Yuki, of course you can, you're only 5 years old, I don't think the women will mind. No protesting, just listen to your mother and come bathe with us. She grabs him from behind and takes him to the women's bathroom, leaving the three men to their thoughts. Sajobo, Azazel and Barakweel, damned lucky one. For an hour all the naked women took turns hugging the redhead, who felt very comfortable for some reason he didn't know. Kurama, my puppy has taken the first steps to becoming a man, it's good that he memorized the scene so he'll know how to enjoy it in the future he. Naruto had arrived at his room but he didn't expect what would happen in his room. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Akino in his bed. Akino, hello Naru-chan, come hurry up and let's go to sleep. Naruto, Ne-chan, what are you doing in my bed? Akino, I like to sleep like my cute little brother, there's nothing wrong with that, she said, pouting. After putting on his pajamas, Naruto lay down carefully so as not to hurt his sister's wings and was immediately crushed by a very comfortable hug where the girl also used her wings, making the hug even more comfortable for him. In fact, he felt better that way than sleeping normally. Akino, good night. Naruto thought this was one of the best days of his life, surpassed only by yesterday. If every day were like this, he wouldn't mind staying forever. And he fell asleep instantly. The fox inside him was saddened by this. Even though Naruto would be safe among the Tengu, he couldn't stay forever, that was the purpose of the summoning contract. Although they could bring people to their realm, he couldn't stay forever, not to mention he wouldn't be able to appreciate all aspects of life. His pup would live a long time, at least 200 years, being a pure-blood Uzumaki, but Tengu lived for at least 500 years, and if that weren't the problem, a Tengu and a human were different species, despite being very similar. If he wanted to have his own family, he would have to leave sooner or later. Kurama, enjoy this peace, pup, because sooner or later you'll have to go back, though you'll still be able to see them. I just hope you can still be happy. The fox thought sadly about his cub before going to sleep. Proof. Before we begin, for those who didn't see the announcement, I ask that you watch it, it's important for the story and includes things I didn't mention in the first part. 3 years later. 3 years had passed since Naruto arrived with the Tengu clan. Every day was a very hard and exhausting activity for little Uzumaki. From training with his sensei, to funny moments with the Tengu, to his time with his family, Naruto didn't think he could have a happier life than this. His first year was, to say the least, the most stressful. Every day, from Monday to Saturday, he would wake up early for breakfast, and then the torture would begin. While Barakweel trained him physically, several of his clones would study with Azazel and his men, studying subjects like mathematics, language, anatomy, chakra theory, and history, the most important of all. The odd thing was that Azazel taught anatomy, while Kokobeel was in charge of history, though it was more of a hindrance than a help. They weren't bad teachers, the problem was that he would be more productive if Azazel didn't make perverted comments all the time, but being so young, he didn't understand that. Kokobeel was very efficient in his teaching, suffice it to say he was very illustrative when talking about the weaknesses of ninjas, which involved a lot of blood. But he didn't complain, especially when Barakweel told him all about his clan. The classes with his father were the most exhausting of all because Barakweel made him train to such an extent that, even with his exaggerated stamina, he was still completely worn out afterward. Given his already exceptionally high stamina, he asked his father to place seals on him to increase the difficulty of his training. From then on, his training became much harder because of the seals and his father, who didn't know the meaning of the word moderation. But he never complained because his goal was always to meet Barakweel's expectations, whom he loved like a true father. Afterwards, they would have lunch in their usual clearing and then train in taijutsu. Since they couldn't find a suitable style to train in, they decided to create one that was a combination of the main taijutsu styles of the Uzumaki, Uchiha, and Senju clans. During this time, he developed some of his ancestors' abilities, such as superhuman strength. Although it would take him several years to reach a level similar to Hashirama's, it was at least enough to shatter a genin's bones without using chakra to augment his strength. He also possessed chakra chains, which, to everyone's surprise, were initially as resilient and strong as Mito Uzumaki's, allowing him to master them in a matter of weeks. He had also completed his chakra control exercises such as tree walking, waterfall climbing, and separating sand grains, among other things. The Tengu, upon learning that he might be able to use Mokutan in the future along with other secondary elements, began to train him in his elemental affinities. Naruto used a lump of clay to shape it for earth release, Doton, a glass to control the water inside for water release, Suiton, and for wind release, Futon. He moved his hands precisely to manipulate the air at will. With fire release, Katon, he used the fire around him to increase or decrease his temperature. Finally, with lightning release, Raiton, he used static electricity around his body to increase his speed, and by touching a person, they would receive an electric shock depending on the amount of electricity, and after the shock, the person would suffer paralysis. And so we arrive at today with the Tengu family having breakfast as usual, but today was a special day because today Naruto would have a test to advance in his training, but some were worried about the redhead because the test would have a condition that would make Naruto feel very bad. Sajobo, Naruto, it's time for you to take your test. Naruto, but what's the test about, hehe. Kokabeel, you must go to the lands of one of our allied clans, the Wolf Clan. You will have to search for a giant grey wolf in a forest, but when you find it, you will face the true test. After breakfast 11 o'clock, Naruto had arrived at a forest after performing the summoning jutsu to reach the place of his test, which was a gigantic forest with gigantic trees that, despite being normal, covered a large part of the place, so the sky could not be seen clearly. 7 hours later, Naruto/Kurama, but where the hell is that wolf? The reason for this was that they had been going through the forest for 7 hours without finding the wolf, but suddenly they saw a flash of light on a path to the right. Without a second thought, Naruto ran as fast as he could toward the light, which grew larger as they approached, until he burst through the trees and reached a vast meadow. In front of him were mountains, but the most impressive thing of all was a grey wolf with black stripes, yellow eyes, and fangs similar to Kurama's. And it was bigger than Shikaku. The wolf noticed Naruto and spoke. Wow, you're here. I thought you'd take longer, but honestly, you surprised me. Anyway, my name is Raisin, and you're ready for your test. Naruto, it's an honor to be in your presence, Raisin-sama, and yes, I'm ready. Raisin moved a few meters, much to the redhead's confusion, but he could see a man tied to a chair with a blindfold over his eyes. Raisin, kill him. That was all he said, and it made the redhead's mind go white. Naruto, what? Raisin, kill him. This is what your test consists of. This person is a well-known criminal in the land of rice who kills civilians for pleasure, so don't worry. Naruto felt an indescribable fear. He always knew that one day he would have to kill. He wasn't like other children who dreamed of becoming famous and powerful ninjas. He didn't know what the shinobi life was like, hours and hours of training and the constant danger of death. He always considered the idea of killing, but not so soon. Even so, with a trembling hand, he drew a kunai and approached the man who was shaking with fear. Terrified, he raised the kunai and struck. He felt the kunai pierce his stomach, and the man's screams would haunt his dreams for a long time. When he released the weapon, he wanted to scream, but he felt arms embrace him. Turning around, he saw it was his mother, and he hugged her with all his might, crying in her arms until he fell asleep. Meanwhile, his mother plotted a punishment for his father. Raisin, excuse me, but since Naruto passed the test, he can sign my contract, but since now is not the time, you can take the scroll. Yuki nodded and with her other hand touched the scroll, disappearing in a puff of smoke. Undoubtedly, Sajobo will suffer at his daughter's hands by the end of the day. Naruto's mental space. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw only an ocean in which half his body was submerged, but he wasn't sinking. Turning his gaze, he saw his brother without the cage that had imprisoned him, looking at him sadly. Kurama, cub, I know you feel bad about what you did, but we have to worry about where we are. They are in limbo. Both brothers looked around until they saw an old man whom Naruto looked at with confusion and curiosity, and Kurama in shock and disbelief. He was an old man who looked about 60 years old, he had a grayish hairstyle with a long beard of the same color and so long that it reached his stomach. He had a white coat with 6 magatamas, white skin, a crimson red eye with 9 blades on his forehead, purple and ringed eyes, and he was levitating with 9 black spheres underneath. If Naruto weren't depressed right now, I would be asking him several questions. Kurama, Hasuromo hihi. Naruto, would you mind telling me what's going on? He said sadly that he still hadn't forgotten his first casualty. Kurama, well. God. I don't even know where to begin. Anyway, this guy's a real pup. May I introduce myself, my son? Confused, but from this point on, this infant cannot be any more. Naruto/Kurama, what? They said they didn't understand what the old man said. Have the true words I've spoken perhaps gone somewhere else? Naruto, what did he say? Kurama, what the hell? They didn't understand what the old man was saying. The old man ignored the confused faces and focused on the redhead who was looking at him with a little fear. It's best to leave it ready enough for you to understand. Throughout the old man's speech, both of them tried to make sense of what he was saying, leaving them with their own thoughts. Kurama, okay, he speaks in the language of when he died, that's why I don't understand him. The language has changed a lot in recent centuries. Naruto, I still don't understand anything, but at least he's not an enemy. I think. Both brothers tried to make sense of the old man's words until Kurama got fed up. Kurama, enough, If you're going to say something, make sure we understand. But the old man kept talking, though no one could understand him. Kurama, Waya stop it, you're not making any sense. Naruto, who didn't understand anything, had an idea. Naruto, excuse me, are you perhaps an alien? That was the only thing he could think to say. History, liberation, consequences, and a new future. Meanwhile, in the redhead's mind, they continued talking to the sage of the 6 paths. Hagoromo, an alien, you haven't spent 3 years on it, mate. The boy and the fox turned around, confused by this sudden change in language. Naruto, well, I think it's more or less understandable. But the old man looked at them, thinking that they still didn't understand what he was saying. Hagoromo, they still don't get it. I didn't think this conversation would be so bad. Kurama hurriedly began gesturing with his hands. Kurama, no, this is fine, it's just that you surprised us with that change of language. Naruto, I still don't understand anything, but I feel like all the dignity this man once had is gone. How strange. The old man and the fox turned to the redhead while Kurama held back his laughter. Hagoromo, really? I thought you'd be smart enough to understand. I'll try something else. Everything's cool. Kurama, Dad, leave it, it doesn't suit you to talk like that. You almost sound a bit silly. The old man with a twitch in his eye made one of the spheres rise until it was a few meters above Kurama's head so that the sphere turned into a large black rock that fell on top of Kurama, making a giant bump on him while he held on and had a tear in anime style. Hagoromo, what a fool. Is that any way to speak to your father? The fox just lowered his gaze, looking remorseful. He wasn't remorseful in the slightest. Hagoromo, although it's good, it's my fault for speaking badly. Kurama, then why are you hitting me? Naruto, I do understand that. Until his jaw dropped to the ground. Naruto, father. The fox was about to answer, but the look the old man gave him silenced him. Hagoromo, yes, people know me as the sage of the 6 paths or Rikudo Sennin. Naruto's brain was about to collapse. In front of him stood the one everyone considered the true god of the shinobi. Naruto, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Hagoromo, lift up your head, young man, there is no need to kneel before me. Then he turned his gaze to the fox. Hagoromo, it has been a long time, my son. Kurama gave her a wide smile while holding back his tears. Kurama, I've missed you Hagoromo Naruto felt happy for his brother, but the emotional moment didn't last long because the sage looked at him. Hagoromo, but this is not a social visit. I have been observing you for a long time, Naruto Uzumaki. Both brothers tensed up. At the same time, they wondered why the wise man would be interested in the blonde boy. Hagoromo, I understand that this is not the time to have this conversation. This reminded the redhead of the day's events, causing him to lower his head in remorse. But then he felt the soft, warm fur of his brother and smiled at the fox. The wise man could only smile at the brother's touch. But then he grew serious. Hagoromo, you see, Naruto, right now I must tell you my story and that of my family. This sparked the interest of both brothers, Naruto to learn the story of the Rikudo Sennin, and Kurama to hear the story of their father, which he never told to him or his brothers. He told him everything from the tree and its fruit, Kagaya, how Chakra was born, his birth as well as that of his brother Hamura, the war, how Kagaya absorbed the tree and became the Ten Tails, how he and his brother sealed her away, the story of Indra and Ashura, the creation of the nine-tailed beasts, and then the story of Madara and Hashirama. Throughout the story, both paid attention, but something made the redhead doubt himself. Naruto, excuse me, Hagoromo-sama. But who are the current reincarnations of your children? Hagoromo, the curious thing is that my two sons were reincarnated in the same person. Kurama, by whom? Hagoromo, for you Naruto. 0_0. Naruto stood speechless, frozen like a tree trunk. Kurama, on the other hand, responded in a very polite manner. Kurama, you've gone senile with age. No, I refuse to believe those idiots and my puppy are the same person. That surprised them both. Hagoromo, calm down, my son. They are not in their bodies, only their chakra and their abilities. Inside Naruto, Hagoromo could see two figures, both around 22 years old. They were Indra and Ashura, and at that moment Hagoromo could see them facing each other with their eyes. Hagoromo, the conflict between the two energies holds back Naruto's potential, I can see it within him. Kurama was surprised, his cub was already a prodigy, and this was not even his full potential. Naruto, wait a minute, two energies. Hagoromo-sama, being the reincarnation of Ashura, that made me a Senju, but if I'm also the reincarnation of Indra, does that mean I'm an Uchiha? Kurama turned his head so hard that there was even a shocked creak when he saw the old man nod. Hagoromo, if you're an Uchiha, that's why you awakened the Sharingan. Although I'm surprised you awakened its final stage so quickly. If Kurama had a brain, he'd have a stroke. His pup, whom he raised like a little brother, was related to the most arrogant clan in existence. Hagoromo, let's focus, please. Naruto, you're an enigma. Never in centuries have my two sons reincarnated as the same person, so you're the only one who can tell me if I was right to name Ashura as my successor. So tell me, will you choose the path of power like Indra or the path of love like Ashura? The redhead just sighed, feeling the burden the old man had left on him, and began to remember what the old man had just told him. Both choices had their pros and cons. The path of power would lead to a dictatorship instead of peace, though it had to be admitted that power was necessary to get rid of troublesome enemies who only stood in his way. The path of love, on the other hand, would bring him a great many friends and companions. But the problem was that he would try to help everyone, whether ally or enemy, which would be very naive since not everyone deserved to be saved. He couldn't decide which path to choose until an idea occurred to him. Naruto, I choose both paths. Both were surprised by what Naruto said. Kurama, what do you mean, both? Naruto, well, Kurama and I choose both paths. That confused the old man, but he decided to ask. Hagoromo, your answer confuses me. You had two options, but you chose a third. Naruto Indra was a solitary yet powerful figure who desired a peace that was more akin to a dictatorship. I agree that power is necessary to rid oneself of troublesome enemies, while Ashura chose a path of aid and companionship. I agree with that, but not everyone deserves to live because of their actions. That is why I will choose both paths. If my loved ones grow in number, we will become stronger. If anyone is unable to understand my words, they will understand with my fists. That is why, Hagoromo-sama, I choose both paths. Both were surprised by the boy's speech, especially Hagoromo. Behind the child, Hagoromo could see his two sons shaking hands, and their chakra merged, forming the redhead. A few tears escaped Hagoromo. After millennia, his sons had finally put aside their differences and made peace. Kurama, hee, are you okay? Hagoromo just smiled. Hagoromo, yes, I will be now. That confused them both. Hagoromo, Naruto Uzumaki, I accept your answer. Honestly, I can't think of a better option. I suppose it was very foolish of me to believe that peace would last forever, he said, approaching the levitating child. Hagoromo, I have fulfilled the reason I came here, and you have given me a satisfactory answer. Now I only have to wait for you to achieve what my sons could not achieve individually, peace. But before I leave, I must give you one last gift. Raise your hands before me." The boy, confused by that last part, did what he was told and raised his hands. "Hagoromo, I will grant you my power and that of my children, and I will trust that you will use it for good purposes." Then the wise man turned to look at his fox son. "Hagoromo, take care of him, my son." The fox, shedding tears, replied, "Kurama, count me in, Hagoromo, hee. Hagoromo, don't worry, we'll meet again in a few years." He said that a flash appeared, blinding them both, but the whole place disappeared, including the Sage of the Six Paths. Naruto's bedroom, 8 p.m. Naruto woke up in his room and realized it was night. He assumed that after the test, they had taken him to his room to rest. The boy rubbed his eyes with both hands to shake off the sleepiness, but he felt that he had his left eye and could see. He also saw a black crescent moon on the palm of his left hand and a white sun on the palm of his right. "Naruto, it wasn't a dream." "Kurama, of course not, cub." "Naruto, hello Kurama and I. So it all really happened." "Kurama, hahaha, you take very little importance that Rikudo Jiji officially named you as his successor." "Naruto, it all seems so unreal." "Kurama, calm down, pup, I understand. I also think you should go see your parents, they must be very worried." The redhead quickly got up and went to find his parents, ignoring the changes he'd undergone, including his new left eye. Kurama laughed at that. "Kurama, hee, the faces everyone will make will be one to remember." Council room, torture room. After Naruto fell asleep in Yuki's arms, he was taken with her and the Wolf Clan summoning scroll to the Tengu compound. His father was then dragged in for interrogation. Apparently, Kokobile was the one who came up with the idea, and Sajobo and Azazel agreed. So, he tied his father's hands and feet to a steel chair, gagged him, and stripped him naked. Then he went to find his accomplices and did the same to them. At the end of the day, the three Tengu were still naked and tied to the chairs, covered in hundreds of whip marks and bleeding profusely. Yuki, still holding the whip, wore a psychopathic grin that remained unchanged throughout the torture. A few steps away, Baraquil and Akino watched the spectacle in terror. "Yuki, it seems they've already learned their lesson, I don't know what they think." The three tied-up Tengus tried to speak, but the bandages over their mouths prevented them. "Yuki, apparently not. They haven't learned their lesson yet. I guess I'll have to keep going until they learn never to hurt my baby again, Kukuku," the deranged woman said, laughing like a crazy Yandere. Yuki raised the whip, ready to strike, but stopped when she heard the door open. "Naruto, hi, have you seen Ka-chan?" The redhead stopped when he saw the scene. His son, Azazel, and Kokobile were tied up and naked, covered in marks from hundreds of lashes, blood oozing out everywhere, while their mother held a whip that, curiously, was red, and a thought occurred to him. "Naruto, mothers are scary," he thought to himself and looked scared. Yuki's first instinct was to jump on him, but he froze like everyone else when he saw his new left eye. "Yuki, Rinnegan." The Tengu decided to sit down and talk like civilized people. This included the previously tortured Tengu being dressed, much to the dismay of Yuki, who was possessively clutching her son. Naruto told them everything that had happened with Hagoromo and the rest. "Sajobo, this can't be known, Naruto. Not by anyone. If someone knew this, a lot of people would want to steal your power." Naruto was about to say something, but the fox spoke through the crystal ball. "Kurama, don't worry Rikudo, hee, not only did he grant you the Rinnegan, but also the knowledge and information on how to use it, although you will have to prepare to begin your Rinnegan training." Kokobile, come on, Fox, he's already killed a person, so he's an adult and can do it. Kokobile couldn't finish because Yuki whipped him across the face. "Yuki, it seems you haven't understood, I'll have to give you another lesson." Everyone was frightened by the torture that Yuki inflicted on Kokobile. Naruto was in his mind space talking to his brother. "Naruto, Nii-chan ready?" "Kurama, I've been ready since we said goodbye to Jiji, get me out of here." Naruto approached the cage, raising his left hand where the moon mark was. He took out the seal paper and saw a spiral lock. He placed his palm on it, and the lock began to spin until it disappeared. Without the lock, the redhead stepped back to give his brother space, who kicked the door open. Kurama, finally, God, I couldn't stand being trapped anymore, at least now I have more space. But the redhead felt a large amount of Kurama's chakra entering his body until his brother's chakra caused him to transform. Imagine him as a redhead. Naruto, what happened to me? Kurama, it's the chakra mode you obtained when you freed me, which is made from the chakra I recovered, but don't worry, you can dissipate it just by concentrating. Naruto concentrated and the chakra mode disappeared. Kurama, it's also time for you to know the truth. Naruto, which truth? Kurama, that your parents are still alive with your 4 siblings. Konoha. Many things had happened in Konoha since the redhead left. One example would be, one day after Naruto's departure from the Uchiha mansion. In the Uchiha clan mansion were the 3rd Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi, the clan leader Mikoto Uchiha, Anko Mitarashi, and Mikoto's 4 daughters, Kasumi Uchiha, Satsuki Uchiha, Sayuri Uchiha, and Hitomi Uchiha. For those who don't know about the last 2, I forgot to mention them in chapter 1, but they did the same thing, they scorned Naruto the day he left. They are also both adopted and were formerly friends of Naruto, but they too scorned him the day he left. These people were gathered because they were summoned by Hiruzen and Mikoto, although the 4 girls were in tears while the adults were furious about what the younger Uchiha girls told them. Flashback, the day Naruto leaves Konoha. Sayuri, Satsuki, Kasumi, and Hitomi were walking peacefully through the village, happily discussing what they could give Naruto as a gift, but when they crossed an alley, 2 villagers caught them off guard and pushed them against the wall. Sayuri, hey, what are you doing? Let us go. Villager 1, listen carefully because I won't repeat myself. I want you to insult and abandon the demon. Satsuki, he is never our friend. Villager 2, if you don't do it, you won't like seeing us kill him. Kasumi, okay, we'll leave him, but don't hurt him. Hours later, the incident occurred where the 4 Uchiha girls insulted and despised Naruto because of those villagers. End flashback. The adults were beyond furious at those 2 cowards, while the 4 girls continued to shed tears. Hitomi, please tell Naruto-kun that we didn't mean to do that. Hiruzen, unfortunately, I must tell you that we will not be able to do that. This confused the girls, especially Anko, who knew nothing about the incident. But Hiruzen and Mikoto told her everything about Naruto's attack on her birthday and his escape. By the end of the story, they were all crying over what had happened. From then on, the Uchiha girls changed their personalities from cheerful and respectful to cold and unhappy. The only people they continued to behave the same way with were their family and those who didn't hate Naruto, but Mikoto knew that this was their daytime personality because at night they would cry in their beds. Other events that occurred during those years included the massacre of the Uchiha clan, which left only Mikoto and her 4 daughters, along with Sasuke, as survivors. The girls didn't hate Itachi for that reason, while Sasuke reverted to his original self. Another event was Hiruzen's drastic change in mindset. When news of Naruto's escape spread, the villagers and ninjas wanted to hold a festival, but Hiruzen forbade it. Some refused and were killed. As time passed, civilians continued to refuse Hiruzen's orders and were subsequently killed. Hiruzen became much stricter than before and no longer allowed himself to be manipulated by the civilians. However, an event shook the entire elemental continent and became the most talked about news, surpassing even the Uchiha clan massacre, the return of Minato Namikaze and Kushina, along with their 4 children. Right now, Minato was acting as Kage, and he was very dejected. Not because of his job, but because the entire continent knew he had abandoned his son, Naruto. Flashback 1 year ago. Hiruzen was calmly going about his work until some knocks on the door caught his attention. Hiruzen, come in. 6 figures entered through the door, 2 adults and 4 children, all hooded and wearing black robes. No one said anything until Sarutobi broke the silence. Hiruzen, they returned sooner than I thought. Minato and Kushina. Both hooded figures removed their hoods, revealing a man with spiky blonde hair, but what surprised the old man most was seeing the woman. Kushina wore her usual clothes, but her hair, instead of being red, was white. Minato, it's been a while. Hiruzen. Hiruzen, I am the Hokage and you must speak to me with due respect. Minato tensed up as the 4 smaller figures hid behind Kushina. Minato, of course, Hokage-sama, he said, stuttering. Hiruzen, good for you for returning so quickly. Minato, well, you remember we left because. Oh, by the way, we haven't introduced you to our children. Introduce yourselves, kids. Hiruzen turned his gaze to the 4 children, removing their hoods to reveal their faces, 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys were copies of Minato, except one had longer hair than the other, while the girls were quite different. One had long blonde hair tied with a ribbon similar to Sakura's, while the other had long blonde hair tied in 2 pigtails. One of the boys and one of the girls greeted them disrespectfully. Hello, my name is Menma Namikaze, nice to meet you, Jisan Databeo. Shout, hello, my name is Mito Namikaze, nice to meet you, Jisan. Shout, Hiruzen unleashed a bit of killer instinct. Hiruzen, I suggest you moderate your tone when speaking to the leader of a people. Both children were trembling with fear as they nodded repeatedly. The old man wouldn't let his position be questioned, except for Naruto. He turned to the other 2 who seemed smarter than the first 2. My name is Shio Namikaze, pleased to meet you Hokage-sama. My name is Nagato Namikaze, pleased to meet you Hokage-sama. Both were smarter than their brothers at greeting with respect. Hiruzen, well. Minato, well, you see, we were wrong. Hiruzen, so you realized that abandoning Naruto for 11 years was a mistake. Minato, Hokage-sama, I did what was necessary for the good of the people. Hiruzen, it was best for the people to abandon them in their greatest moment of need, and also to abandon your son to his fate. Minato, he had to do it to train the 4 of them to know how to use the Nine-Tails chakra, and with Naruto it wasn't necessary to train him since he didn't have the Nine-Tails chakra and only had its soul. He remembered that night when he divided the Nine-Tails chakra into 4 parts, the Yin in Nagato and Shio, the Yang chakra in Menma and Mito, and the soul in Naruto. A loud crash startled him from his thoughts. He saw Hiruzen smash the table with a single blow. Hiruzen, don't talk nonsense. If that were the case, any of you could have kept Naruto, including Jiraiya, but you didn't. Hiruzen, and why did they come back, although I already have an idea. Minato, well, you see, the Nine-Tails chakra ran out. We tried to teach them how to use it, but there wasn't much success. The 4 of them frequently lost control, but we kept trying. However, the chakra ran out, and they simply aren't Jinchuriki anymore. Furthermore, ninjutsu was very difficult for them due to the changes caused by the Nine-Tails chakra. They can't use genjutsu. They only had kenjutsu and taijutsu left. After the Nine-Tails chakra ran out, we tried to figure out what the problem was, and we concluded that the Nine-Tails generates its chakra through its soul. Hiruzen, so they only came back because they got the wrong Jinchuriki. Kushina, you make it sound like we don't care about our son. Hiruzen, and I was wrong. They only came back because they chose the wrong person to train, and they abandoned that person to their fate. They were both going to protest, but Hiruzen didn't give them time. Hiruzen, if they had wanted to, they could have asked Jiraiya to look for information about Naruto, but they didn't, otherwise, they would know what happened. Everyone tensed up because of what was said. Kushina, did something happen to Naruto? The children were scared and worried about their brother, whom they wanted to meet. Hiruzen, let me tell you the results of both of your stupidity. He told them everything, from the first attempt on his life when he was just a week old, to his life in the orphanage, the beatings, and the incident that occurred on his birthday before he left. Minato was paralyzed, unable to believe that his son had lived through hell because of him. Meanwhile, Kushina was on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, while her children, who were also weeping for their brother, comforted her. Kushina, please tell me where my son is. Hiruzen, I don't know. Minato, what do you mean you don't know? Hiruzen, I don't know. 2 days after that beating, he decided to leave so he wouldn't be hurt anymore. But he left this letter. Then the old man took out Naruto's farewell letter. His mother took it, fearing the worst, while her husband peered in to read it. Gigi, I know this isn't the way to say goodbye, but if I didn't, you'd never let me go. I can't take it anymore. From the day I was born, everyone has called me a monster, said I didn't deserve to live, that I was a demon who should never have been born, and so much more. I can't go on like this. All I can say is thank you. Thank you for considering me a person, just like Mikoto-san, Tsuchiyaji, Ayame, and Enkone. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again, but I hope you understand what I had to do. Naruto Uzumaki. The mother, still crying after reading the letter, had a dead expression even as she was being comforted by her children. Minato, how could you let this happen? Hiruzen, don't blame me for your stupidity and failures. I had to deal with a half-destroyed village, the deaths of hundreds of shinobi, and recover lost prophets. I did what I could. Minato went white after that. Minato, what have I done? End flashback. She emerged from her reverie, wiping away the tears that had fallen as she left her office, since it was getting dark. Shortly after his return, Sarutobi reinstated him as Kage. The people's joy was fleeting, especially when he revealed that Naruto was his son. Almost everyone apologized, but he didn't care. The clan leaders also apologized, with the exception of Mikoto, who always regarded Minato and Kushina with hatred for what they had done. The news of his son's treatment reached the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Namikaze thought it would please his wife, as the daimyo was a great friend of the Uzumaki clan, but he was very wrong. The daimyo insulted all the advisors for what they had done to the redhead, but the worst was for Kushina and her children. The daimyo knew all the traditions of the Uzumaki clan, but there was one very important one: an Uzumaki never abandons their family. Therefore, Kushina was no longer an Uzumaki, having abandoned her son, and she lost her chakra chains. The daimyo took all the scrolls and prophets of the Uzumaki clan and would give them to Naruto when news of him was heard. The other villages found out about Naruto's mistreatment. Kiri and Suna didn't care. Iwa hated Minato even more for abandoning his son, and Kyumo was outraged by how their Jinchuriki were being treated. The blond man set aside his thoughts upon arriving at his home, the Namikaze clan compound. The sound of thumps caught his attention, and he went to the courtyard to find his two sons, Menma and Nagato, Mikoto's son and Tsum Inuzuka's son. Sasuke Uchiha, the new heir to the clan, and Tsum's younger son, Kiba Inuzuka, were engaged in a taijutsu match. Unsurprisingly, Kiba was the more balanced fighter, given his clan's emphasis on physical combat. Sasuke wasn't doing badly, but lacking the Sharingan to predict his opponent's movements left him vulnerable. Menma and Nagato held their own quite well against both men. For years, they had struggled to train their sons. In ninjutsu it was almost impossible for them. They couldn't do genjutsu, they only had to train kenjutsu, taijutsu and the Kyuubi's chakra, but that was until they exhausted all that chakra, and according to him, and he wasn't wrong, Naruto now had the Kyuubi's chakra completely, and by having the soul that chakra would be regenerated when he used it. Menma/Nagato, Tu-chan. That scream snapped him out of his thoughts. Minato, hello, I see you're putting a lot of effort into your training, he said with a smile that tightened when he saw the children's faces. Menmo and Nagato smiled back. Menma, yes, Databeo, we're giving it our all in training. Nagato, right, guys. Sasuke and Kiba didn't respond and wouldn't unless absolutely necessary. Minato's spirits plummeted at the look of distrust and slight disdain on their faces. He walked away and entered through the front door, seeing the 5 people in the room, Kushina with Mito and Shio, and a little further away, Tsum and her eldest daughter Hana, who were sadly watching Kushina, who had Shio and Mito to her right and left. Kushina sat on the sofa staring at the floor, oblivious to her daughter's gentle caresses. Minato was about to ask about Kushina's depressed state when he noticed a vial of liquid on the table in front of her. Inside the liquid was a blue eye. The older blonde man turned his questioning gaze to Tsum, who simply sighed. Tsum, we went for a walk around the village with Kushina, but we ran into a drunk villager who started harassing us, saying he gouged out your son's eye and kept it as a trophy. Kushina beat him up and forced him to tell us where he lived so we could get the eye back. And well, Tsum glanced at the jar, and Minato was shocked. The eye inside was his son's, and he understood the reason for Kushina's distress. Since their return and conversation with Sarutobi, Kushina had tried to find information about Naruto, but without success. Now, however, his wife had recovered a piece of her son. The blond man gently took his wife's hand. Minato, we'll find him, I promise. Kushina turned her head mechanically. Kushina, but what will she think of us? She'll surely hate us and won't want to forgive us or return to the village. Minato, we'll have to see what happens when that happens. Mom, when I become a genin I will go look for Narumi, I will find him, it's a promise. Shio, me too, they said with great determination. Kushina, but what will the people do? They'll probably want to use him as a weapon. Minato, that won't happen. I'm going to protect our son. The Inuzuka smiled, perhaps there was hope for this broken family. Companions. Tengu Mansion. For years after the test, Naruto continued training his skills after completing the basic training. He immediately began elemental training, learning a colossal number of jutsu for each element and even creating his own, such as Katan, Infernal Dragon Flame Suten, Wolfang Whirl Futten, Capturing Tornado Raiden, Electric Snake's Doton, Earth Hand's Crush. He also claimed from Azazel the scrolls with jutsus that he deserved for the bet, and thanks to that he learned one of the jutsus of one of the people who loved him in Konoha. It was the Chidori of the Anbu Inu who protected him from time to time. He also began working with his secondary elements and the Sharingan, the Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and the Rinnegan, making significant progress. He mastered the regular Sharingan perfectly, being able to predict and copy movements and jutsu with ease. He also made good progress with the Manjikyu Sharingan, being able to use Amaterasu, which he began training to use with the Enten element, even shaping Amaterasu. He was able to learn Tsukuyomi and Susanoo, though with difficulty, especially the latter, which he could only summon his purple ribs to. He made good progress with his secondary elements. He mastered Mokuton to a high level, being able to control and create plants, roots, trees, flowers, wooden structures, wood clones, and even create a wooden dragon half the size of those created by Hashirama. Finally, with the Rinnegan, he didn't make much progress other than his Rinnegan now having 2 Tomo, which meant he awakened 2 of its abilities, the Deva Path, which allowed him to control gravity, and the Gakido Path, which allowed him to absorb ninjutsu. Also, after the trial, he signed the contract with the wolves, who aided him with his Raiton element and physical abilities. There was also his use of Kurama's chakra. Because he was a Mokuton user, it was very easy for him to master his chakra, allowing him to use up to the 5th tail without problems. He also developed a transformation where 9 solid tails, like those of the real Kurama, appeared, and the redhead's hands and feet enlarged, becoming covered in Kurama's orange fur, drastically increasing his strength. His nails also grew longer. His tails, hands, and feet possessed such great strength and resistance that with a single tail swipe, he destroyed a rock. This transformation was called hybrid mode. I also trained in the use of Fuinjutsu, and in just 4 years I was already a level 10 Fuin master, something truly impressive, and now I was starting to train even more to achieve the last 5 levels. And now Naruto was playing shogi with his grandfather at night while they chatted peacefully. Sajobo, tomorrow is the day. Naruto, yeah, I didn't really expect them to have a farewell party. Sajobo, what did you expect? Your family, my grandson, in every way except blood. But where are you going? Obviously not to Konoha. Naruto, I think my best option is Kyumo. Sajobo, one of the great nations is a better place to confront Konoha if I want to retrieve you. But why Kyumo? Suna and Taki are out because they are allies of Konoha. Naruto, if I go to Iwa they'll use me as a weapon, and I can't go to Kiri because they're in the middle of a civil war. Sajobo, that seems like a solid plan. But how will you get to the land of lightning if you use reverse summoning? You'll appear right in the middle of Konoha, which wouldn't be a very pleasant prospect, especially with Minato Namikaze's back. Escape is highly unlikely. Naruto, Azazel used my clan scrolls to make me appear in front of Kyumo. Sajobo, are you sure it will work? Azazel's experiments usually end badly. Naruto, I think I'm going to take a risk, that is, say how many chances there are of failing. Sajobo, well, it's your funeral, Naruto. Naruto, actually, it's yours. Game over. Sajobo's eyes widened in shock when he realized he had lost. Sajobo, but how? Naruto, I couldn't leave without beating you at shogi. Good night. He said this before dashing off to his room. Sajobo, come back here, I demand revenge. Naruto ran to his room until he was standing in front of it, but he also stopped to remember what the years were like until he felt himself being wrapped by 2 arms and some breasts were pressed against his head. Akino, what are you thinking about? Naruto, nothing, Wani-chan, just remembering the past. Akino wrapped her wings in the embrace. Akino, Era, is it that you reconsidered and now you'd rather be with your Wani-chan? Naruto, I'm sorry, but there's a life I have to live. Akino, can I ask you a favor? The redhead turned his gaze to look straight at his sister. Akino, close your eyes. Naruto did as she asked, but he didn't expect what Akino would do. Akino kissed him on the lips. At first, he was surprised, but then he returned the kiss, much to the delight of the dark-haired girl, until they finally separated. Akino, I love you. That shocked the redhead. Naruto, one chan yo. Akino, I couldn't help it after hearing your dreams and when you said you loved me, I just couldn't help it. I love you. Naruto didn't know what to say. Of course he loved her, she was his sister, but now he saw her as a woman and blushed. But Akino gave him another kiss. They stayed like that until they separated. Akino, I know you have to leave and we won't see each other for a long time, but please let me be yours tonight. The next day, the most important figures of the Tengu clan were outside the clan mansion to witness the redhead's farewell. Yuki, with tears in her eyes, hugged Naruto. Yuki, my little Naruto-chan has grown so much, I don't want you to leave. Naruto, Mom. Barraquil decided to intervene. Barraquil, dear, it's time for you to move on with your life. Yuki, eat well, don't sleep late, don't break the 3 most important rules of shinobi, and summon me when you arrive in Kumo. Naruto, Mom. Yuki, and I want you to always remember that I love you. Naruto hugged her tightly. Naruto, I love you too, Mom. The moment was cut short by Akino's arrival. The 2 children stared at each other as Naruto tried to think of what to say to his sister, while Akino looked at him sadly at the farewell. Then Akino approached and leaned in, and finally, they kissed on the lips, causing everyone present to gasp in surprise. Akino, I'm going to miss you, he said, embracing the redhead. Naruto, me too, but we'll meet again, that's a promise. Azazel, ahem, not to be a spoilsport, but it's time to go. The 2 siblings separated as Akino glared at the perverted Tengu for ruining her moment with her little brother. Naruto approached a multicolored portal with a large number of seals outside it. Naruto, we'll see each other soon, he said to go through the portal that disappeared. Unknown location. Naruto, Azazel, I swear that when I get my hands on you, I will kill you. Kurama, come on, pup, cheer up, it could be worse. Naruto, worse than this. The reason for this was that Naruto had fallen from a great height, but when he crashed to the ground, his fall was broken by a body. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw that this body was being used in an experiment. Several scientists were present, and they quickly summoned their guards, who wore purple robes and ninja headbands with a musical note. They began chasing him throughout the place, which seemed like an underground base filled with people used in experiments. Naruto couldn't find the exit because the place was like a labyrinth, but at one point he managed to trick the guards with a shadow clone. This gave him time to create a wooden box, slightly larger than himself, in plain sight, and he climbed inside to hide from the guards. Kurama, come on, cheer up, you could have ended up in the Hokage's office in front of Namikaze. Naruto was about to say something but fell silent when he heard the footsteps of 2 people approaching, and to his relief they did not notice his presence. Guard 1, shit, where is it? Guard 2, it's impossible he escaped, this place is a labyrinth. We have to get rid of him, he sounded very scared. Guard 1, why are you worried? It's not that big of a deal. Guard 2, idiot, what do you think Orochimaru-sama will do to us if he finds out? He'd use us as his experiments. They both ran out looking for Naruto, who heard the whole conversation from inside the box. Naruto, who is that? Kurama, I think I know him. If I'm not mistaken, he's known as the White Snake, and he's a traitor to Konoha and an SS rank criminal. Honestly, when I saw him inside the tomato, I thought he was a pedophile. But anyway, it's best if you try to sense the presence of the guards or prisoners to find the exit. The redhead nodded and began using his sensory abilities, sensing the presences of those in the underground base. He felt some curious presences, though. One was someone who seemed to be dying intermittently, and the other was someone who appeared to possess 2 chakras, one benevolent and one malevolent, both seemingly vying for control. But far from that place, he sensed 2 presences that shocked him. Naruto, Kurama and II, do you really think they are? Kurama, it seems so, pup. You better go to that place. Elsewhere, in a cell, there were 5 children, a boy and 4 girls, all of whom appeared to be about 12 years old. There were 2 redheads, both with long hair, but one wore glasses and the other had a flute and a 3-tomo seal similar to the Sharingan around her neck. Another girl had purple hair tied up like a palm tree with 2 side bangs and wore a green coat. The boy had short white hair, purple eyes, and teeth like a shark's. The last girl had short mint green hair. I know I'm terrible at giving descriptions. All the children were asleep except for the 2 redheads. One was painfully touching the seal on her head, while the other stared blankly ahead. Both would have been lovely girls if it weren't for their disheveled hair and clothes that had clearly seen better days. The girl with glasses was using her sensory abilities, a trait inherited from her Uzumaki clan. She had a very hard life. In fact, if it weren't for her friends in her cell and 2 others in a different cell, she would have no reason to live. He was in his bed like every day with his cellmates, doing nothing. Not that there was much to do other than talk with his friends, but he usually just used his sensory abilities to pass the time. But then the one who would save his life arrived, along with his friends. The redhead sensed someone with an enormous chakra that was very similar to hers, her sister's, and her parents'. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that person rapidly approaching her cell. Bam! The redhead opened her eyes along with the other children who woke up because of that noise, and her sister who looked confused at the door. Bam! Everyone saw the cell bars being smashed and destroyed from the inside. Bam! Everyone was speechless as the stranger destroyed the bars with blows. Naruto, wow, I wanted to destroy it with a single blow. Kurama, that's because you haven't perfected your super strength yet. Naruto began to look at the cell, which still had dust in the air from the broken bars, but a glimpse of red caught his attention as the children stared at him in utter amazement. The children looked at him in disbelief, although the purple-haired girl couldn't help but think he was very cute. Naruto, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. The redhead couldn't say more because the redhead with glasses threw herself at him, hugging him as if her life depended on it. But he felt the redhead shed tears and repeat the phrase, "I'm not alone," over and over. The girl realized what she had done. I'm sorry, Naruto, why don't we introduce ourselves again? Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Hello, my name is Karen Uzumaki. Hey, introduce yourselves, he said, referring to the other children. Those affected by the scene composed themselves and got out of their beds to stand in front of the redhead. Hello, my name is Tayuya Uzumaki. The other redhead said. Hello, my name is Suigetsu Hozuki. The white-haired man said. Hello, my name is Guren. The purple-haired girl said. Hello, my name is Fu. The green-haired girl said. Naruto was about to answer, but suddenly became serious, which surprised the others. Then they began to hear footsteps approaching in the hallways. The children started to worry about what the guards would do to them. Even though all of them, except for Karen, could face them on equal terms and defeat them, they didn't because they were afraid of what Orochimaru would do. The redhead left the cell and saw 3 guards. Naruto, I hope they weren't hurt, or there will be consequences. The redhead thought. Kurama, I doubt it, they had no wounds or signs of being drugged, but it seems that this Tayuya had Orochimaru's cursed seal, but I think you can use a seal to avoid the Sanin's influence so she can use the seal's power without problems. Focusing on the 3 sound ninjas, he began to approach with murderous intent. When he was about 10 meters away, he charged lightning chakra in his right hand while concentrating chakra in his left. As the ninjas drew their kunai, one of them moved forward to kill the redhead, but was surprised when the redhead effortlessly dodged him and, in a favorable position, struck him in the chest. Naruto felt the ribcage crack as the guard was sent flying, crashing into the wall in a pool of blood. As he flew, he also knocked the second ninja off course, taking him down with him. The third ninja didn't have time to react before Naruto's right hand was enveloped in lightning, causing Naruto to scream. Naruto, Chidori. Naruto mercilessly pierced the guard's chest with a technique that left the children who witnessed the scene speechless. The redhead felt no remorse. If these people worked for someone who committed such acts, he would show no mercy. He turned to look at the others but was embarrassed to see them all staring at him wide-eyed. Naruto, well, it's time to find the exit. Karen, wait. Tayuya, we can't leave without Juice and Kimitaro. Naruto, his friends. Everyone, yes. Naruto, okay. Everyone was surprised again. Naruto, of course I will if they are important to you. Although Karen jumped on him and hugged him tightly. Karen, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Naruto, okay, but could you tell me where you are? Also, he made some hand seals. Naruto, shadow clone jutsu. And 50 clones appeared. Naruto, the clones will cover us and also cause havoc around the place. So the clones and the group started running through the base where the 12-year-old children watched as the clones destroyed everything in their path, also as they opened the cells freeing prisoners who helped the clones kill the guards and scientists while others escaped as best they could and still others helped the clones kill the scientists and guards in search of revenge. After a few minutes, the group was led to a cell slightly deeper than the others. Inside were two 14-year-old boys. One was thin, with white hair and 2 red dots on his forehead, marking his clan. He was sitting at a stone table with various artifacts attached to his body and several papers tucked into it. The other was very tall and muscular, with spiky orange hair and red eyes. Both were worried about their friends because of the commotion, but then they heard a very familiar voice. Karen, Juice, Kimimaro-kun. Juice, Karen, Naruto, you can't open the cell. Now they were both shocked. Kimimaro/Juice, Naruto nii. But something that also surprised them was that the door was knocked down with a punch and from outside came their friends and the stranger who, according to Yugo, was quite a warrior because of his clothing. Juice, who are you? I asked the redhead. Naruto, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. That surprised the orange-haired boy, Kimimaro, who had overheard the conversation. Naruto, I'd like to talk to you guys, but we have to go. Juice, we can't, Kimimaro's condition won't allow him to leave and I don't want to go. Tayuya, Juice, it's the truth, a monster like me doesn't deserve to be free, I'm a bomb ready to explode. Naruto, you enjoy killing. Those words confused everyone. Naruto, I'm going to help you. Juice, what? Naruto, you enjoy killing. Juice, no. Of course not. Naruto, well, in that case, you're not a monster. I'll help you with your other personality later, but for now, you can leave this place and live somewhere else. Juice, but what if I hurt someone? Naruto, in that case, I'll stop you in your tracks. After all, I'm very strong. Tears welled up in the redhead's eyes and with a groan he said, Juice, if I want to leave here, I want to be free. Naruto, well, let's go. Everyone stared in disbelief as he had changed his friend with just a few words, but they saw Naruto approaching Kimimaro's bed. Naruto, how serious is your illness? Thus began a long explanation of Kimimaro's illness, and Naruto had an idea and raised his right hand with the sun mark. Kimimaro, what are you doing? Naruto, I cure your illness. Naruto placed his hand on Kimimaro's chest, where seals began to cover his body as the machines emptied and the seals detached from Kimimaro's body. Everyone was confused by what had happened, but Kimimaro was able to stand without difficulty, much to everyone's shock. But what surprised everyone most was that Kimimaro took one knee. Kimimaro, Naruto-sama, you have given me a new life. I am at your service. Several felt like bursting into laughter at what had been said, but they remained silent as they began to hear footsteps a little ways away. They saw a large number of guards approaching, so the redhead sprang into action. Naruto, earth release, earth wall. An earthen wall blocked the entrance, plunging them into darkness, but Naruto created a fireball in his hand using his katan technique and began to think of a way to escape while the guards pounded on the wall. Then an idea struck him, and he formed hand seals. Naruto, Doton Rock Pillar. A large pillar appeared which began to rise, destroying the ceiling and everything beyond until it stopped and disappeared, and Naruto created another one a little bigger. Naruto, climb the pillar, it will take us up to the surface. They all jumped onto the pillar, which began to rise along the path left by the other, but to everyone's terror, the pillar stopped rising halfway up and got stuck in a room where there was a door. Naruto, over there. The redhead shouted, pointing towards the door. Everyone rushed out with everything they had, as the base was about to collapse on top of them due to the commotion. Naruto immediately delivered a flying kick to the door, in Guy's signature dynamic entrance style, and the last thing they saw was blue. Blue everywhere, where they saw the sea and sky, completely blue. Naruto stood there, awestruck and moved. He had never seen the sea before, and it was far more beautiful than he had imagined. The others felt a deep nostalgia, having not left the place in a long time, but the one who reacted most strongly was Yugo, who had never seen anything like this in his life because he had spent his entire life locked in Orochimaru's prison. Tears streamed down his face at seeing the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The moment would have been incredibly moving if they hadn't now been falling towards the sea. Taiyuya, but who the hell would think of leaving a door that leads to a precipice? He shouted so that everyone would realize the situation. Karen, ah! The redhead screamed, clinging to Naruto. The redhead, in a swift moment, activated his hybrid transformation, with which he tightly grabbed his companions with 7 tails and held Karen firmly with his left arm, and with his right hand created 3 chakra chains that gripped various places on the rock wall, which stopped her fall but left everyone with doubts. Karen, Naruto, do you have tails? Naruto, this is going to lead to a very long conversation. Appearances. This section is solely to showcase the characters' appearances. Let's begin. Naruto. Imagine that his left eye is bandaged and behind it is the Rinnegan, in addition to adding a vertical scar on the bandaged eye and also putting the marks on his cheeks. Menma, Nagato, Shio, Myth, Kasumi, Satsuki, Sayuri, Hitomi, Akino. Our lives. In a village in the land of fire, 8 people could be seen walking. 2 of them appeared to be 14 years old, and the other 6 were 12. It was nighttime, and there was a lot of commotion due to the festivities taking place. The 8 individuals were dressed in an unusual way. Naruto put up his hood so that any Konoha ninja who might be patrolling the village wouldn't recognize him. He and his companions were looking for a hotel to spend the night. None of them were used to crowds, with Kimimaro shirtless and Yugo nervously looking around, and the others somewhat uncomfortable with the large number of people present. Naruto could only be grateful that the civilians were busy celebrating. Naruto was about to get fed up. After all, they had spent more than an hour looking for a hotel, but they were all full. He could go across the rooftops, but that would attract too much attention. The redhead looked away when Karen fearfully took his hand. Karen, Naruto nii, he said timidly. Naruto, what's happening? Fu, the truth is that we are very uncomfortable. Guren, it's just that we're not used to being in the middle of a lot of people. Naruto, I think it's best to go through the alleys, there aren't as many people there. They all attended and went into a passage between 2 buildings. But they saw 7 civilians emerge from the alley. The leader appeared to be a fat man. Civilian 1, well, haven't they told you that children shouldn't be alone at night? Suigetsu, what do they want? Gordo, these are difficult times, so we need collaboration. Kimimaro, you won't receive a single ryu from us, you fat piece of shit. Fatty, I'm tired of it, kill those idiots and we'll take everything. The fat man couldn't finish because Suigetsu raised his hand like a gun, and a jet of water shot out, hitting the fat man and killing him instantly. The other civilians didn't have time to react as the group moved with incredible speed. Guren created a blue crystal shaped like a sword, which attached to his arm, and Taiyuya created 2 chakra chains. Yugo grabbed one of the civilians' heads with his right hand and delivered a powerful blow to his chest that sent him flying. Kimimaro pulled out a kunai and embedded it in another's head. Guren cut off his head, Taiyuya restrained him with the chains and then shattered his bones. Fu unleashed a gust of wind that sliced another in half, and finally, Naruto used his super strength to send the civilian flying. The redhead, fed up, created 5 shadow clones. Naruto, find a hotel where we can stay. The clones nodded and began running in different directions. For the next half hour, Naruto helped Yugo with his problem by entering his mind. After a long conversation, the good and bad sides of Yugo reached an agreement and merged. Now the group was in a hotel with several rooms, but they gathered for dinner at a family table in the lounge, eating with a somewhat desperate or anxious air. Naruto, hey guys, calm down, the food isn't going to disappear. The boys put aside their utensils to answer. Guren, I'm sorry, it's just that it's been a long time since we've eaten something so good. Kimimaro, I had never even tasted anything so good. Yugo, me neither. After all, Orochimaru didn't care to see if I was comfortable. Naruto was shocked by that. Naruto, you say that as if you've always been with Orochimaru. The orange-haired boy nodded, surprising Naruto even more. Naruto, and by the way, how long were they locked up in that base? Taiyuya, Karen and I have been together for almost 6 years. Orochimaru captured me along with Karen when several ninjas from the village hidden in the grass wanted to use us as breeding machines to recreate the Uzumaki clan, and I proved that when I used the chakra chains. Karen, our mother died trying to protect us from those ninjas. Orochimaru killed them and kidnapped us, she said, trying to hold back her tears. It was then that she felt a hand on her shoulder and saw it was Kimimara's, who gave her a supportive smile. The redhead with glasses blushed slightly and nodded to the albino. So everyone told their stories until only Naruto remained. Guren, and you, Naruto-kun. Naruto sighed, it was time someone other than the Tengu clan knew his story. 30 minutes later, the only thing around the table was silence. Naruto recounted his entire life, from his relationship with Kurama to the present day. At first, everyone was deeply shocked when he told them about his relationship with Kurama and how the Bijou considered him his younger brother. The girls almost burst into tears when he told them how he was kicked out of the orphanage. Kimimaro and Yugo clenched their fists in anger when they heard how he lost his eye, and everyone was enraged when he told them how the younger Uchiha clan had mercilessly despised him. When he told them about his life with the Tengu clan, everyone smiled, knowing that his life hadn't been a complete disaster, but the shock came when he told them about his trial. Everyone felt sorry for the redhead who had to kill at such a young age. But what surprised them most was his encounter with Hagoromo. They simply couldn't believe it. Being named the successor of the Sage of Six Paths was something very surreal, but all doubt disappeared when Naruto uncovered his left eye, revealing the Rinnegan, causing everyone to have expressions of astonishment as if there were nothing else to be more surprised about. Naruto, are you okay? It seems they saw a ghost. Kimimaro, not at all, Naruto-sama. I'm sorry for doubting you. Fu, so you inherited your desire to bring peace from the Sage of Six Paths. Suigetsu, what's it like to see through the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths? Naruto, well, if I'm not wearing the eye patch, I can see chakra perfectly in a way similar to the Byakugan, except I can't see the chakra points. Karen, something else to surprise us with, Naruto nii. The redhead smiled and, concentrating a little, a wooden dragon the size of a 20-centimeter lizard emerged from the floor and climbed onto the redhead's head. Guren, how did you do that? Suigetsu, my best theory is that he's a Kekkei Genkai. Naruto, if Mokutan is a secondary element that until now only my great-grandfather Hashirama Senju and the youngest son of Hagoromo Jiji Ashura Otsutsuki were able to use. Yugo, the Shodame Hokage. Naruto, well, to wrap things up, there's something I need to discuss. I originally wanted to go to Kumo until I ran into you guys, so I wanted to ask what you're going to do now. Kimimaro, I'll say it again, you've given me a new life, so please Naruto-sama, let me go with you. Karen, I'll go with you, Naruto nii. After all, we're family. Taiyuya, I say the same. Fu, I'll go, after all we're both Jinchuriki. Guren, I'll go, I'd love to go with you. Although saying that made me blush a little. Suigetsu, I'll go. I prefer to go in a group rather than alone. Yugo, I'll go with you, Naruto-sama. Naruto, hehe, well in that case we'll leave tomorrow, although we have a problem. Everyone, what problem? Naruto, you see, we can't just walk to the land of lightning since we'd have to cross a large part of the land of fire. The best thing to do is go to the land of waves to catch a boat that will take us to the land of lightning. The next day, the group of 8 walked peacefully through the forest until they reached a cliff with a 50-meter waterfall next to it. Suigetsu, Naruto, what are we doing here? Well, first I want to tell you that we're going to our destination by flying. Fu, but I'm the only one who can fly thanks to Chome. Naruto, yes, but I'll use a technique that will allow us to do that. And he made a hand seal. Doton, levitation jutsu. Then he touched it and leaped off the cliff. Everyone rushed to try and grab him, but they were surprised to see that he wasn't falling. Naruto, see, I told you there's nothing to worry about. Then the redhead performed the same jutsu on all his companions, and they all jumped into the air where they were all floating but unable to move. Yugo, then we'll fly to Kumo. Naruto, no. It's too risky and they might take it as an invasion, so we'll go to the land of waves to take a boat to the land of walking, Ino Kuni. And the redhead, concentrating, created 7 chakra chains that coiled around his companions' waists and began to fly toward the land of waves. but they would also be involved in a great cause. The Land of Waves. In the Land of Fire, 8 people were flying overhead. Among them was Naruto, who was flying behind him, followed by his new companions, their chakra chains attached to their waists. Naruto watched the flight, but glancing at his companions, he noticed the girls and Suigetsu enjoying the flight. Kimimaro was also enjoying it, but more calmly, and Yugo was perched on a small bird. Naruto, where did he get it? The redhead wondered. But he saw that they were already close to the Land of the Waves, so in order not to attract everyone's attention from the air, he began to descend. Tayuya, Naruto nii, why are we going down? Naruto, we're very close to the country now. It's best not to draw attention and enter normally to avoid any problems. Until they reached the ground and the chains disappeared and the redhead touched everyone, returning their original weight to them, and they began to walk towards the Land of Waves. A few hours later, the group was walking along the road when a group of bandits blocked their path. The leader of the group, a fat, bald man, walked ahead of them with an arrogant look. Gordo, well, look what young people like you are doing here. Naruto didn't take it seriously, but the older white-haired man didn't take it very well. Kimimaro, move out of the way, you trash, you're blocking the path. The fat man, very upset by that insult, exploded in anger. Fatty, kill the men and take the women, it'll be great fun. But he didn't know he had dug his own grave. The bandits approached arrogantly, but after taking a few steps, Kimimaro pulled a bone from his right sleeve, disgusting them. The white-haired man launched himself forward with incredible speed, brutally killing all the bandits who screamed in pain or tried to flee, but all met the same fate. Only the fat man remained, lying on the ground with his right arm and leg severed from his body, tears streaming down his face like a cowardly crybaby. Meanwhile, the redhead's group was closing in. Naruto, okay, tell us why they've come to kill us. The fat man, who was already on his last legs, told everything he could. Gordo, we were sent by Gato, the businessman. He sent us and ninjas to intimidate the villagers into submitting to us so we could conquer the country and seize the people's riches. Gato charges very high taxes and imprisons women to use them as prostitutes and created. The fat man could not continue because he had bled to death. Guren, so what do we do? Naruto, let's go to the village to help. Suigetsu, and why will we help them? Naruto, why can't we abandon a village full of innocent people to be tortured by a coward? They all nodded and headed towards the village. 2 hours later, the group had already arrived in the Land of Waves and were able to see what life was like there. Dying children and adults in alleyways, children begging, houses in ruins. Everyone was shocked by the state of the town. Children and adults in the streets in a deplorable condition, children begging, houses or apartments in disrepair, and so on. The group began walking through the town looking for a bar to get information, ignoring the stares they were receiving. After 10 minutes, they spotted a fairly large establishment and thought it was the town's bar, so they went inside. The place was quite crowded, but most of the patrons stared at them, mostly with hatred. Apparently, they thought they worked for Gato. Naruto, damn, it looks like they want to kill us with their eyes. I hope Kimimaro doesn't cause any trouble. The redhead thought, looking at the white-haired man with an annoyed expression. They walked through the place with many hateful looks towards them until they reached the tavern owner who appeared to be a very tall and muscular man. Tavern owner, cat scum is not welcome in my establishment, he said with hatred. Naruto frowned. Naruto, we just arrived at the village and we don't know what's going on. The tavern owner was as surprised as everyone else present. Tavern owner, wait a minute, they don't work for cats. Naruto, we didn't just come to the Land of Waves to take a boat. Tavern keeper, oh, I'm sorry, it's just that since Gato arrived, life in the country has become quite complicated. He also started buying up ships and businesses by hook or by crook, and he locked the daimyo in the dungeons of his castle. Naruto, would you mind if some foreigners gave you a hand? Everyone looked at him in surprise, except for the rest of the group. Tavern owner, they want to help. Naruto, my companions and I have received ninja training, so the bandits won't be a problem, but we need information from the ninjas. The civilians looked at them hopefully. The tavern owner was about to reply, but someone came shouting. Civilian, guys, we have to go to the square. Kaiza is going to be killed in a cat execution. Everyone tensed up and ran away while Naruto's group followed them to the plaza. Town Square. There was a man tied up on a small wooden platform, and nearby was a rather small man dressed in elegant attire, wearing dark glasses and carrying a cane. It was Gato. Naruto's group would have killed the dwarf, but the real problem was the shinobi beside him. He was a tall man with a gigantic sword, which Naruto sensed Suigetsu was very interested in. He had bandages over his mouth, no eyebrows, black hair, and his chest was bare. Naruto, of all the shinobi, it had to be Zabusa Momochi. There were also two similar-looking men whom Naruto recognized as the Demon Brothers, and another man carrying his ancestor's sword, the Raijin no Ken. This was Aoi Rokuso, a jounin from the village hidden in the rain, accompanied by a trio of genin. Bandits were holding the villagers captive, forming a perimeter. Cat, people of the wave apparently still don't understand that I'm the one in charge here, as is the case with this man who came to my castle to demand my taxes, which is unforgivable, so this man is condemned to death. 2-chan. A child cried out from the crowd, held back by his mother, who had tears in her eyes. Beside them stood an elderly man. They appeared to be Kaisa's family. Naruto, alright guys, I'll give you a task. Yugo, you take care of Zabusa. Kimimaro, I want you to rescue Kaisa. Suigetsu, you take care of Aoi and her genin. Taiyuya and Fu, you two take care of the Demon Brothers. And Guren, I need you to protect Karen because she's the only one who can't defend herself. Karen, and why can't I do anything? Naruto, Karen, you're the only one who hasn't received training, and I don't want to lose you. The redhead with glasses was going to reply but decided not to. Gato turned towards the crowd. Cat, let this be an example to you. I'm the one in charge here. Kill him. Those last words were directed at Zabusa. The swordsman raised his sword, ready to kill his victim, but he paid attention to what happened. In a fraction of a second, Naruto made a hand position and several pillars of rock pierced the bandits, surprising the civilians who ran away and the rest of the group acted. Fu created a gust of wind, and Taiyuya created 3 chakra chains that headed toward the Demon Brothers, who couldn't dodge them. One was impaled by the chains and died instantly, while the other was cut in half by the gust of wind. Suigetsu created a water dragon that forced Aoi and her genin to jump off the platform. Yugo launched himself at full speed and in seconds transformed his arm into a larger, brown one that headed toward Zabuza. But Zabuza wasn't a jonin for nothing, and he quickly lowered his sword, blocking the blow with difficulty due to the orange-haired man's strength. However, Yugo created a cylinder in his arm that released a jet of chakra, propelling him and sending Zabuza flying. He got up on his knees, in great pain because the blow had broken some of his ribs. Kimimaro grabbed Kaisa and took him to the family they had heard earlier, who, still in shock, thanked him and held the man, leading him away. The redhead and the albino met near the platform where a furious cat was perched atop it. Cat, who are you? A scream filled with fury. Nar/Kim, what matters is who you are, you little shit. They both screamed, unleashing a great murderous instinct, scaring the dwarf who ran until he was behind Zabusa. Cat, Zabusa, do something. The swordsman struggled to his feet but began to laugh. Zabusa, ha ha ha, this complicates my introduction, but you don't need an introduction, Naruto Uzumaki. The redhead changed his expression, his eye changing to Kurama's, and said in a voice that made the swordsman's nerves stand on end. Naruto, how do you know my name? Zabusa, underestimating your reputation. The long-lost son of a Kage, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, and the most wanted man in the land of fire. Even though there's no picture of you, your features are unmistakable. Naruto, you talk like you're interested. Zabusa, I was actually hoping to find you so I could recruit you into my group. After all, the Demon Brothers were very weak. Naruto, I'm not interested, especially if you work for that little piece of cat shit. Zabusa, it's a shame, but we'll see each other another time. Zabusa lunged at Gato and struck him on the back of the neck, disappearing in a flash of lightning along with the unconscious cat. The redhead sighed and turned with the albino and the orange-haired boy to face the others. They saw Suigetsu, Guren, Taiyuya, Fu, and Karen, who had awakened her chakra chains because a bandit had tried to attack her from behind and had managed to kill him thanks to the chains. They were standing in front of Aoi, who was alone because his genin had already been killed by the group. He was clutching the Raijin no Ken, trembling with fear, but the 3 remaining genin arrived. Aoi, back off, can't you see me? I'm invincible, I have the Raijin no Ken, you can't defeat me. The redhead glared at him, annoyed. That bastard had stolen the most important sword of the Senju clan, as well as that of his great-grandfather, Uncle Tobarama Senju. Naruto, I will kill you in a way that not even the most sadistic person in the world would want to do to someone. He said this, causing his eyes to revert to Kurama's and begin transforming. His ears grew and turned orange, his hands and feet enlarged and were covered in orange fur, his nails changed into black claws, and he grew 9 tails as large as a person. Upon seeing that, Aoi wet his pants while crying like a baby. Naruto, I will kill you quickly. Then, without the slightest mercy, Naruto used 6 of his tails, with 2 crushing the hands, 2 crushing the feet, 1 piercing the chest, and 1 piercing the head, killing Aoi instantly. The redhead began to return to normal, but not before taking the Raijin no Ken that belonged to his great-grandfather, Uncle Tobarama, and now he would use it. Naruto, well, now we have to deal with the cat. Fu, but how will we take care of him? Naruto, well, I'll assign each of you something. Everyone, what a thing. Naruto, well, Yugo and Fu will go to the daimyo's palace and kill the bandits and ninjas protecting the dungeons and rescue the daimyo. Kimimaro and Taiyuya will go for the bandit camps, and Guren, Karen, Suigetsu, and I will protect the village. They all nodded and headed back to the village. Wave bar. There was a party going on at the bar thanks to Naruto's group's victory, and the 8 young people were engaged in various activities. Yugo, Suigetsu, and Kimimaro were chatting quietly with the civilians, Guren, Karen, and Taiyuya were talking amongst themselves, and Fu was playing darts. Meanwhile, he himself sat at the bar with several dishes that were his dinner. He saw the bartender and the elderly man from the family approaching. Old man, thank you. I'll never be able to repay you enough for saving Kaiza. By the way, my name is Tazuna. He said he was taking a drink from his sake bottle. The redhead somehow felt his fox brother drooling over it, which piqued his curiosity. Though he also started to think. Zabuza had mentioned his name and said his appearance was unmistakable, and they would already know who he was, so he decided to be honest. Naruto, thank you, and my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Having said that, the old man began to babble, much to the tavern keeper's confusion. Tavern keeper, old man, what's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Tazuna, nananaruyututu azuum kiii. She said, cake changing, without losing the impression. Until she came to Tazuna, Naruto Uzumaki, the lost son of Konoha. The Uzumaki frowned. Naruto, lost son. Tazuna, it's not official, but that's what they call you in Konoha now. After all, you're the long-lost son of a Kage and heir to a very important clan. You're like a prince. Naruto, I'd appreciate it if you didn't call me that. I'm not a son of Konoha. I left that shithole willingly and I never intend to return. The innkeeper was curious. So he handed him a bottle. Tavern keeper, that sounds like a sad story, would you mind telling it? Naruto took the bottle. Naruto, it's not a story I like to tell, and he gave her back the bottle. Tavern keeper, you know, with age comes experience, and I know that ninjas can't do their job without relaxing. Besides, a drink always helps before starting a story. Naruto wondered whether to take it or not, but in his mind the fox encouraged him, but he was still curious because he had recently been drooling over the bottle, but he decided to take it and took a drink. The next day, Naruto woke up to find his 2 drinking buddies asleep, bottles in hand. The redhead began to recall what had happened yesterday. He ended up telling them about his life and other things, though he didn't mention anything beyond his time in Konoha. Naruto, I wonder if Barraquil 2-chan would like to have a drink with me sometime soon. Just a minute, damn it. He left the Tengu Valley 2 days ago and had not summoned his parents. Looking around, he saw that he was the only one awake, everyone else was asleep. He saw Yugo lying next to a barrel with the same bird from before. Kimimaro was on top of a table with Karen beside him. Guren, Fu, and Taiyuya were asleep on the ground, and Suigetsu was in a pile of villagers who were lying on top of others who appeared to have drunk a lot of sake. Leaving the shop, the redhead looked around and it was empty. So he made hand seals until he stamped his hand on the ground, creating a cloud of smoke. His father appeared and began to get his bearings, trying to figure out where he was, and then he saw his son. Barraquil, Naruto. Naruto, me too san. The winged man was killing him with a hug while tears streamed down his face in anime style. Releasing the hug, Naruto recounted what had happened during those 2 days. Barraquil, I am going to crucify Azazel. Naruto, don't worry Two-chan, at least I ran into some friends and 2 family members. Barraquil, he will still pay. Naruto smiled wickedly. Naruto, what if we ask Ka-chan to do it? Barraquil copied his son's evil smile. 1 hour later. Guren, are you sure you can handle this, Yugo? Fool. Juice, don't worry, I have Viri with me. Everyone, who is Viri? Juice, it's the, he said, pointing to the bird on his shoulder. Tayuya, and what will that bird help with? Yugo, thanks to my senjutsu, I can communicate with animals. Karen, what? Why didn't you ever tell us? Juice, why did they never ask? Everyone fell over in anime style because of that answer. Battle, tears, farewell, and a new home. Cat's den at night. The tycoon was relaxing alone at a hot spring, sipping sake. After yesterday's disgraceful execution, he had to return to his base in a rage. He was enjoying his bath when one of his men arrived shouting, "Bandit, boss, cat, ah!" I screamed like a little girl. After getting out of the shower fully dressed, "Cat, you damn bastard, you scared me." Bandit, the daimyo's palace was attacked. Cat, this is a joke, right? Bandit, no. We tried everything, but those 2 wouldn't die. He killed half the bandits like it was nothing. Gato, still shaken, was about to leave the room, but another man arrived. He was one of those who stayed in the woods. Bandit 2, sir, our men have been killed. Cat, men who are men. Bandit 2, everyone. Only I'm still alive. Cat, do you seriously think I'm going to believe that more than 500 bandits have died in 1 day? Bandit 2, they came after us with chains on their backs that moved and pierced us, and another one had bones sticking out and stabbed like kebabs. Bandit 3, boss. Cat, now what? Bandit 3, our forces in the villages have been wiped out, ninjas attacked us. Gato was seething with anger, those brats were ruining everything, so he went out to look for Zabuza. In the forest, Yugo and Fu were returning to the village after attacking the daimyo's palace, killing all the bandits inside. But on Yugo's shoulders was none other than the daimyo himself, who had been locked in the dungeons of his castle, but they freed him. Kimimaro and Tayuya were walking back to the village after killing all the bandit camps, although Kimimaro went away to go to the place indicated by Naruto to face Zabuza and his accomplice that Aoi mentioned before killing him. In the village, Karen, they'll arrive any minute now. Civilians, at your service, miss. The town had been over-fortified. Entrances and alleyways were blocked, houses with holes that would be easy to attack were plugged with rock spikes, and roofs were covered with planks through which things could be thrown. Kimimaro and Naruto were waiting in a clearing for Zabuza and his accomplice. Until they arrived. Zabuza, well, I won't have to look for them everywhere, he said, drawing his sword. Naruto, yes, you and your accomplice, while Gato went to the village with the rest of his men, while the rest of my companions are missing. Zabuza, you had it planned, didn't you? Naruto, what do you think? Although we know why we're here. Zabuza, Haku, you take care of the white-haired one, I'll take care of the Uzumaki. Haku, hi Zabuza-sama. Naruto stared at the masked figure for a moment. Using his ability to sense emotions, he saw that this person was the purest he had ever seen. He wondered why this person would be with someone like Zabuza. Sensing Zabuza's emotions, Naruto realized that Zabuza was worried about him. Naruto, Kimimaro, if you can, don't kill him. He spoke quietly enough so that no one could hear him. Kimimaro, hi Naruto-sama. Both the white-haired man and the masked man disappeared in a flash to fight elsewhere, leaving the red-haired man and the swordsman alone. Naruto took the Raijin no Ken and a lightning blade appeared. Naruto, I'm not arrogant like Aoi, but I know I can defeat you, but I also want to make a bet with you. The swordsman looked at him with interest. Zabuza, who bets? Naruto, if you win, my group and I will join yours, but if I win, you will give your sword to my partner. Naruto knew that Suigetsu wanted to obtain the swords of the mist and he wasn't going to miss this opportunity to help his friend. Zabuza, I accept. Before starting to fight, Naruto touched the patch over his Rinnegan eye. In the village, Guren, the cat is already here. Karen climbed some stairs to find a large army of 300 bandits armed with swords, crossbows, knives, and other weapons. The tycoon stood before them, his smile arrogant. In the village, the civilians, to the bandits' surprise, stood with determined expressions. They were going to protect their homes and loved ones, no matter the cost. In the island's forest, two figures of the same age could be seen battling fiercely until one of the two figures was kicked far away from the place by the other figure, but he got up ready to fight even though the mask he was wearing was split in half, but he took out a new one and put it on. Haku, I must say you're strong. I thought the only one mentioned was Naruto Uzumaki, but I see it's not polite not to introduce yourself. My name is Haku Yuki. Kimimaro opened his eyes. Kimimaro, the clan specializing in the Hayaton element, apparently my partner and I are not the only survivors of the bloodline purge. Haku looked at the albino in confusion. Kimimaro, my name is Kimimaro Kagaya. Haku looked fearfully at the white-haired man. Haku, I see, I won't have to let my guard down at any time. A little further on, a fog-shrouded area could be seen where a redhead effortlessly blocked his opponent's sword strikes, who watched him with frustration. Moments ago, Zabuza had executed his signature jutsu, the hidden mist technique, attempting a surprise attack on the redhead, but Naruto's sensory abilities had made it impossible. Reluctantly, Zabuza deactivated the fog. After all he was doing was wasting chakra, and now he was behind a tree, plotting a plan. Naruto, Doton Pillars of Assassins. A large number of pointed pillars of earth appeared near the swordsman, who had to move away from the tree. Zabuza, Sudden Water Bullets. The swordsman launched several water bullets that forced the redhead to cut them or shards without problems. Naruto, hey, can I ask you a question? How come you haven't broken the bandages over your mouth even after throwing those water bullets? Zabuza, Professional secrecy, I don't tell just anyone my tricks. But anyway, let's continue. They both approached each other and began an intense kenjutsu fight that neither seemed to be winning, but Zabuza retreated, beginning to perform a large sequence of hand seals. Zabuza, Sudden Great Wave. Naruto opened his eyes. He knew the technique, but he needed to gather a large amount of water to use it. A huge amount of water gathered, creating a wave that hurtled toward the redhead, who did only one thing. After the wave disappeared, leaving a trail of destruction, the black-haired boy breathed heavily, exhausted. The technique had cost him almost all of his chakra. With Kimimaro, the albino was surrounded by a multitude of ice mirrors, each reflecting his enemy. The battle reached a stalemate. Yuki couldn't pierce the armor within Kimimaro, and Kimimaro couldn't break the mirrors. But in the midst of the battle, an earthquake was felt, alerting both of them to their respective masters. Haku wanted to end this as quickly as possible to see what was happening with Zabuza, but he couldn't. His opponent kept pace with him effortlessly. But something was bothering him. Haku, why are you holding back? Kimimaro, why did Naruto-sama ask me not to kill you? Haku was surprised by that. Kimimaro, you must be someone remarkable if my lord asked me to do that. Haku, sir. Kimimaro, yes. Lord Naruto-sama saved me from the shit that was my life, like the others in the group. Haku, we're quite similar. Zabuza-sama saved my life and I can never repay him for that. Then countless needles emerged from all the mirrors. Kimimaro Arrow didn't even flinch and prepared his next technique. Kimimaro, I haven't perfected this technique, but I have no choice. He thought before concentrating a lot of chakra in his palms. Kimimaro, Echo Dance. Suddenly, he slammed his hands into the ground, and several large bones erupted, deflecting all the needles and shattering all the mirrors. Haku was forced to jump from the mirror where he was standing, then grabbed onto a tree to see what had happened. To his surprise, the Kagaya had literally created a forest of bones. Yuki jumped from the tree and landed on one of those bones, a fatal mistake. Kimimaro, it's my victory. The albino appeared on the bone that Haku was leaning on, which fell unconscious due to a blow to the back of the white-haired man's neck. In the village, Gato was furious watching the battle. He wasn't sure if that was the right word, but the villagers were gathered behind barricades and rooftops, throwing everything they had. A great many bandits had been killed or were unable to continue. Some managed to get into the village, but several women arrived with pots full of water. The bandits laughed at this, but the women threw the water on them, and they realized it was boiling. Armed and wearing armor, they tried to take off their clothes, but it was too late, and the bandits fell like flies. There were still a few men left. With Naruto, Zabuza looked at the trail of destruction caused by his jutsu, but what the redhead did shocked him. 6 chains emerged from the redhead's back. 4 of them embedded themselves in the ground in a circular shape, creating a dome that acted as a shield, completely protecting the Uzumaki from his jutsu. The other 2 chains approached him and coiled around him, immobilizing him and blocking his chakra. He was defeated, his sword lay farther away. Naruto, looks like I won. Zabuza, that's what it looks like, God, me defeated by a 12-year-old. Ha ha ha. But suddenly Kimimaro arrived at the scene with Haku still unconscious on his back, much to Zabuza's relief. Naruto, well, Zabuza, we no longer have a reason to fight. Zabuza, what are you talking about? We're on opposite sides. Naruto, we were, but we wouldn't be if Gato couldn't pay you anymore. Zabuza, don't think I'm going to believe that some civilians from a single town could take on 300 experienced mercenaries. Naruto, who said that from a village? With the battle, Gato couldn't believe it, they were surrounded. The inhabitants of the other villages had arrived, shouting for his blood. He had been surrounded along with the rest of the bandits. The civilians were supposed to be cowards, but now they had courage. The mercenaries and Gato were terrified by their superior numbers. A loud sound caught everyone's attention and they looked up at a roof and saw Yugo, Fu, and the daimyo on top of a building. Civilians, it is the daimyo. The daimyo greeted all his inhabitants and looked at the cat with contempt. Daimyo, cat, you have imprisoned me in my own palace and abused and robbed my people. As ruler of this land, I will not allow you to go unpunished. Tonight, the land of the waves will have justice. Everyone shouted with joy as the remaining mercenaries escaped, leaving Gato alone. Cat, wait, idiots, you have to protect me. He screamed in fear as the villagers approached him. Cat, wait, I'll pay you money, jewels, women, whatever you want. I can be a better leader than that old man. No, please, no. He screamed before the inhabitants rushed at him, putting an end to his reign of terror. With Naruto, Zabuza looked at Naruto in disbelief. Zabuza, you're a cunning dwarf. Naruto, and you're going to keep fighting. The dark-haired man was about to answer but was interrupted by Haku, who was waking up. Haku, Zabuza-sama, I'm sorry, I've failed you. The swordsman's expression changed drastically. Zabuza, wow, you really are useless, you're good for nothing. Yuki's eyes began to well up with tears. Zabuza fell headfirst to the ground, shocking everyone. Then they looked in amazement at Naruto with his fist raised. Naruto, how dare you say that? Don't you care? He's your teammate. Zabuza, shut your mouth. I used Haku just like a cat used me. I don't care what kind of person Haku is, only the blood of his clan. Naruto, why do you try so hard to lie? That surprised everyone. Zabuza, like lying. Naruto, you know, I have the ability to sense emotions, and I can sense yours. Your heart is as black as night, but inside you there's a small light, and that light is Haku. Haku truly loves you, but you don't care. Zabuza, shut up. Don't say another word. I always thought my life would be nothing but killing until I met Haku. No matter how much she denies it, I love her. She's my daughter in my eyes, but I have no right to think that way. Someone as pure as her doesn't deserve someone like me. I'm a monster. Haku stared at Zabuza in shock. But Naruto made the chains disappear, to everyone's surprise. Naruto, you know, to call yourself a monster you'd have to hate everyone and not care about anyone, but you love Haku, and even after everything you did to her, she still loves you. You're not a monster. He said this and then left the place, followed by Kimimaro. Zabuza stared at the 2 figures before looking at Haku. Zabuza, Haku, I'm sorry, can you forgive me? Haku, there's nothing to forgive, Tusan. 1 week later, after Gato's death, the villagers spent their time celebrating, but they also had to rebuild their homes, recover their stolen belongings, and start living again before the tycoon arrived. Naruto's group was very busy, they had to take care of killing all of Gato's men, although it was amusing to watch Kimimaro and Suigetsu, who now had Zabuza's Kubikurabocho because of the bet, chase the remaining bandits as they ran for their lives. But the most annoying thing was finding all of Gado's properties, including drug labs, warehouses, and brothels where he kept his merchandise. The redhead had burned the drugs and freed the women so they could return to their families, and he also gave all the money the tycoon had collected to the daimyo to manage. In short, it was a busy week. Naruto was in the village resting after a long hour of work. Inari, Aniki, Kaisa's son said. The little boy had long considered the redhead his new brother. The little boy offered him a canteen, which he accepted. Inari, how's the work going? Naruto, well, the wall and the houses are almost finished, it just needs a little more work and it will be ready. Inari, when they are going to leave? Naruto, I'd say tomorrow. Inari, they don't want to stay. Naruto looked at him before he began to stroke his head. Naruto, it's not that, Inari, it's that we have a journey to continue. Inari, but if they stay, no one will try to attack us. Naruto, we've done our part, now it's your turn to protect your village. Inari, but we are weak. Naruto, well, get strong. We won't always be here to save you from your problems. If you want to protect your family and village, train and get strong. Inari, but how? When they parted, Inari had a determined look. Naruto had a smile. He was going to return to work, but two approaching figures made him change his mind. Minutes later, two people he knew but could barely recognize appeared. Zabuza had changed somewhat, he no longer wore the bandages over his mouth, and he didn't have his sword, making him almost unrecognizable. Naruto, wow, it almost seems normal. The former swordsman gave her a smile that was mainly visible through his sharp teeth. Naruto, forget it, I didn't say anything. Haku hadn't changed much, he was still wearing the same clothes Zabuza had been wearing a week ago, and his hairstyle was the same. The only difference was that he was no longer wearing his mask. At first Naruto didn't know if Haku was a man or a woman, but now he could clearly see that Haku was a woman. The 12-year-old girl blushed when she saw him. Naruto also blushed at Haku's beauty, but he composed himself by the time they were face to face. Naruto, it's good to see them. Zabuza, I would appreciate it if you didn't look at my daughter like that. Haku, Oto-sama. I screamed the girl, embarrassed and blushing. Naruto, it's a challenge without eyebrows. Zabuza, well, let's get down to business. I want to ask you a favor. The next day, Naruto and his group were waiting for the ship commissioned by the daimyo that would take them to the land of walking, Hai no Kuni. They were waiting for the sailors assigned to sail the ship to finish preparations, though they were also expecting a fifth person. Zabuza and Haku had arrived. Naruto, wow Zabuza, I didn't think you were serious. Zabuza, what did you expect? Naruto, well, you just started your relationship as Haku's father and for you to separate so quickly. Zabuza, I know, but I still want her to come with you. I'm returning to Kiri to join the rebellion led by Mei Terumi, and I don't want Haku caught in the middle of it. Haku, why? Because I can't go with you, I can help you. Zabuza, no. The dark-haired man glanced at Naruto. Zabuza, can you give us a moment alone? Naruto nodded and walked away. Haku, Father-sama, why can't I go with you? She said, shedding tears of sadness. Zabuza, it took me years to realize how much I care about you. We both know you're incapable of killing. Going to war is kill or be killed. Haku, then let's go together. He said pleadingly. Zabuza, I can't, and you know it. They're going to Kumo to join their village, which would open hostilities between our two villages, and I'd have to surrender sooner or later. It's best if I go to Kiri and fight for the rebellion. If I help the village, I'll be considered a legitimate shinobi again. The girl, with tears in her eyes, threw herself into a hug that was reciprocated. Zabuza, be careful, don't let your guard down, and don't stay out too late. They separated and went their separate ways. Kimimaro, Naruto-sama, we're ready. They all started to go upstairs. Karen took Haku's hand, who was still shedding tears, and Naruto approached Tazuna. Naruto, well, this is goodbye. Tazuna, it seems there is still a lot of work to be done. Naruto, although this happened because the country is in the middle of the sea, if I were you I would look for a way to prevent this from happening again. And the redhead ran off, boarding the ship which immediately set sail, leaving the island behind. 1 week later. A week had passed since the ship set sail, and the redhead was in a bad mood. On the third day, they passed an island that brought great sadness to the redheads. That island was Yuzu, the original home of the Uzumaki clan. But that wasn't the reason for Naruto's bad mood, it was something else. "Naruto, I blame you for this, Kurama and I. Kurama, now you know how I've felt these past 3 decades. You drank that bottle all by yourself." The reason he was in a bad mood was because he was dying for a drink of sake. "Naruto, why do I feel so thirsty? I only drank once, I'm not a drunk." "Kurama, I don't know, but the same thing happened to my first container." "Naruto, so the same thing happened to Mito-bachan too." "Kurama, yes. At a party, she drank from a bottle and became addicted. If she didn't drink occasionally, she'd end up in a terrible mood," he said, recalling the beatings Hashirama and Tobirama had received trying to make him stop drinking. Naruto sweated at that, but looking ahead, he saw something in the distance. "Naruto, Earth." He was still far away, but clearly visible. Naruto looked for the captain. "Naruto, Captain. Captain, what's happening?" "Naruto, stop the ship." The confused sailor did as asked. The scream alerted everyone present. "Kimimaro, Naruto-sama, what's happening?" "Naruto, we're almost there, but I'd rather fly." Everyone was surprised by that, but the most surprised was Haku. "Phew, flying. No, we'd go without attracting attention." "Naruto, it's because now that we're closer, we can finish ourselves off." Everyone nodded, and Naruto touched them all using his earth release technique. The entire group had no trouble jumping off the ship and hovering in the air, much to Haku's shock. "Naruto, let's go, Haku." The dark-haired girl hesitated for a moment, but she did it and remained suspended in the air. Haku marveled at this, but then felt something coil around her waist and saw that it was one of the redhead's chains. Turning his gaze, he saw that everyone was in the same situation. "Naruto, okay, lastly I'm going to add an extra touch so they don't see us." The redhead concentrated water chakra in his body and towards the tiger seal, much to Yuki's surprise. "Naruto, concealment in the mist jutsu." When the fog had settled, Naruto began to move towards solid ground. No one said anything as they enjoyed the journey until Haku couldn't stand it anymore. "Haku, Naruto-sama. Naruto, please don't call me Sama already, I have enough to put up with these two." "Jutgo, calling you anything else would be disrespectful." "Kimimaro, I can't call you anything else, it feels very uncomfortable." The redhead sweated from the back of his neck at the absurdity of the situation. Haku looked on, confused. "Karen, forget it, you'll get used to it, they're always like that." "Haku, Naruto-kun," she said, blushing. "Haku, did Sabusa-sama perhaps teach you his technique?" 20 minutes later, Naruto watched with satisfaction as they were close to landing safely. Turning his head, he felt a trickle of sweat trickling down his neck. Haku looked at him with respectful eyes, but she was also blushing. She told him how she learned Zabuza's technique using the Rinnegan without fully activating it, which allowed her to copy Zabuza's technique. Naruto left that for when he sensed 5 presences near them. 4 of those presences were fairly common, but the 5th possessed a vast amount of chakra. "Tayuya, Naruto, they're following us." Everyone was worried. "Naruto, listen, let's go down and assess the situation. If they're ninjas or bandits, we'll have to fight, but if they're from Kumo, don't fight." They all nodded and began to descend until he deactivated the mist, the chains, and the levitation. Naruto quickly grabbed Karen, pulled up his hood, and they all landed on their feet. They then saw that the 5 ninjas belonged to Kumo. 4 of them wore the typical Jonin attire, but the leader, a blonde man, had a more personalized outfit and regarded them with suspicion. "Rubio, what are they doing in these lands?" Although they seemed like just children, he wouldn't let his guard down with the teenagers. They all had large amounts of chakra, especially the one in front, whose chakra pool seemed endless, which worried him. "Naruto, we're heading to Kumo on business, sir." "Rubio, that doesn't answer my question." The blonde boy named C saw the hooded figure remove his hood. When C saw him, his eyes widened in shock. "Naruto, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. My friends and I were heading to Kumo to join their ranks." C leaped from tree to tree, closely followed by the redheads group. The blonde was very nervous, he was escorting the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki as well as the long-lost son of Akage. As they headed towards Kumo, he asked the redhead a few questions. Although he saw the logic in his reasons for going to Kumo, that didn't mean he wasn't going to release his bijou right in the middle of the village. In Kumo, the redhead and his group, along with C, had arrived in Kumo and were heading towards the Raikage Tower. In the Raikage Tower, Raikage could be seen battling his greatest nemesis, paperwork. Beside him were his brother, Killer B, the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, and Darui, his best jonin, excluding the Raikage himself. Also present were his secretary, Mabui, and two 12-year-old girls, Yujito, the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails and a prodigy genin without a team due to a lack of graduates, and Samui, Yujito's sister and another 12-year-old prodigy genin. They were gathered because one of C's ninjas had arrived, saying that C had to tell them that Naruto Uzumaki was coming to Kumo with C. Before he could say anything else, the ninja fainted, which angered the Raikage. I'll send this idiot Chunin to intensive training. The blonde man paid attention to the door when he heard some knocks on it. Pass. Everyone saw C enter with 9 individuals, among them they recognized Naruto, who had just removed his hood. Killer B, Darui, and Mabui were surprised to see him, and the girls had similar thoughts upon seeing Naruto. Yujito was surprised to see another Jinchuriki besides Killer B, and one younger than her own age. She also thought he was very cute with those whisker marks on his cheeks, and it didn't help that a certain cat told her to jump on him and make him her partner, boyfriend, which made her blush. Samui shared her sister's thoughts and was also blushing at the sight of the Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, I never thought I'd see you in my village. Naruto spoke, slightly annoyed by that last surname. Naruto, I have my reasons for coming to your village, Raikage-sama. I suppose your Chunin has already told you. A frowned at that. The idiot fainted before he could say anything. Oh well. Naruto and his group felt a drop of sweat because of that. Naruto, I'm just an Uzumaki, I have no relation to the Namikaze clan. Anyway, my friends and I want to join Kumo. Everyone began to process the Uzumaki's words until their jaws dropped to the floor in shock. I was barely holding back from dancing with joy. Sure, but what can you contribute to my village? Naruto took out a medium-sized scroll and threw it to A, who began to read it, and the more he read, the bigger his smile grew. Naruto, in addition to a trade treaty with the Land of Waves, I can also offer my own knowledge to your village as I am a level 10 Fuin master and I am still progressing to reach level 15. Or if it's the best day of my life. 3 hours later, Naruto was in his room, reminiscing about the 2 hours he spent negotiating with the Raikage. He had to tell him everything, from his relationship with Kurama to the state of his left eye. It was a sensor with a detection range of several kilometers. Surprising. That he could create chains that could restrain a bijou. Brutal. He saw the Kyubi as an older brother figure. Incredible. He had Mokuton, Ranton, and Enten as secondary elements, and also the 5 main elements of chakra. Fucking incredible. 2 hours passed, during which he also told him about his companions, and to say that A was fascinated was an understatement, so he gladly accepted his joining the village. In Naruto's room, he was making hand seals, summoning jutsu. Barraquil, Yuki, and Akino appeared in a puff of smoke. It didn't take even half a second before the 2 women threw themselves into a hug, pressing him to their chests. Yuki, I've missed you, Naru-chan. Akino, I missed you, Naru-kun. The redhead was dying slowly and pleasantly. Barraquil, how have you been since we met in the Land of Waves? Naruto, well, so I went on telling them what he did on the wave and they were proud of how he stopped the tyranny in the country. Yuki, there's also something important I need to tell you. Barraquil, well, you see, Akino decided to shorten her lifespan to be with you. Naruto's eyes widened in shock, while Akino was as red as a tomato. Naruto, why? Akino, what I said that night was I really love you and I can't think of a life without you. She said, on the verge of tears. Barraquil, Naruto, you also have to know that when a Tengu falls in love, he falls in love with that person forever. Naruto, hey Akino-chan, do you want to stay with me then? Akino, yeses. He said he was going to hug the redhead. Barraquil, well, we're leaving now. Have fun, kids. He said this, and then he and Yuki disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto didn't understand the "have fun" part, but when he saw the sensual smile the dark-haired girl gave him, he blushed deeply. He couldn't say anything because Akino pushed him down onto her bed to do what you all know all night long.